Nice. I think we're live on YouTube right now. I'm not sure.
Excellent.
I have no idea. Like I said, we're experimenting.
We're live on the computer.
It's flashing, which is weird. All right. So that's you.
Okay.
So they're going to get the back of my head. So good thing I cleaned up my neckline. Okay. So if I do it there, trying to get it to at least get a little bit of my profile. I think that's probably the best I'll be able to get with this camera.
Yeah.
And then maybe if I
Is
move.
that your camera or they supply that?
No, this is mine. So all of this is my stuff.
Oh, really?
Maybe we'll do one of these things. That. Do I even need it? Oh yeah, I need that.
That helps. Just want it in the frame.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it out of the. All right. I think it's just going to have my back, but that's not a big deal. It's not about me, Jim.
Yeah, it's all about me.
It's all about my guest. All right, we'll see how this works out on the old YouTube. Interesting. And you're like, and we haven't even figured out what this show's all about yet.
Nope.
Well, we're about to. All right. That stuff.
Do you mind if I drink during this?
Oh yeah, no, it's.
I'm never far from my vodka.
This is it's a conversation. So the way I always like to tell people about the show, which you picked up on from listening a little bit, is I always say it's imagine we met each other at a networking event and we got an opportunity to just learn about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And have a nice conversation with each other.
Okay.
That's it.
Except at a networking event, I'd be asking you a lot of questions.
Which is why you're on the show, because you see that right there just tells us how intuitive you are and how thoughtful you are about wanting to learn about other people. So that's exactly why you're here.
Okay.
Because when you think about people, the most interesting people are the people who ask people questions.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just gonna get your audio comfortable. Good. All right, and got my thing here. Why don't you tell me about your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant. Probably my favorite restaurant was in Baltimore, when I used to live in Baltimore, on Cross Street, called the Sobo Cafe. And became friends with the owner, became a regular there, such a regular. I haven't lived there since 2016, but whenever my wife and I walk in the door, they kick up a big fuss.
Do they remember you? That's cool.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so this is
Staff has stayed the same all that time, too.
definitely just getting my back. Hello, everybody. You're just going to get my back here. But not a big deal. Good. So it's interesting. So the reason why I ask about restaurant, I always notice it, and you did it too. It's like people get excited, which is what I want.
Yeah.
So that I can see where the levels go.
Yeah.
So I want them to go to their highest that they're probably going to go. It's like, oh, my favorite restaurant. It's like, oh, that's the one I wanted.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that's why.
Does anybody ever say like Applebee's? Hey,
No.
I really dig Chili's.
I used to work at Chili's. Oh, and the other thing I got to bring up for you, Queens College. I'm from Queens. My parents are graduates of Queens College.
Oh, really?
And then actually, my father is re-enrolled right now in Queens College.
Are you kidding?
75. Yeah,
That's great.
He re-enrolled.
So where in Queens?
Jamaica Estates.
Okay.
Yeah.
I lived in Ridgewood.
I don't know Bridgewood.
Ridgewood. It's right.
Ridgewood. Yeah,
just
course.
north of
Ridgewood.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna silence this.
When I lived there, it wasn't fashionable like here it is now. Which is very odd.
Yes, it is. All right. This is on. Register. Okay. All right. I was like, why is this wet? All right. I'm gonna get us started here. So, any questions for me?
Just take it away.
Have fun, right? Cool. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today has a career spanning over 30 years, much of which was as a college administrator. His goal was always to help set higher education and its institutions on a more successful path. He helped leaders at every level to become their best selves and to cultivate the best in others by refocusing on the organization's mission. After seeing the increased need for this kind of specialized thinking and support in the corporate world, he moved into the corporate arena where he offers his experience and commitment to leaders and emerging leaders in every field that values its mission. Please welcome founder and president of Guidance for Greatness, Dr. Jim Salvucci. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. This is great.
I added the doctor in front of your name because I saw on your website that you're PhD, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I want to put that in there.
Okay. I've been leaning into that a little more lately, so
yeah, I think it's pretty cool, right? I mean, you had to work pretty hard to get there.
Okay.
Actually, we were just talking off mic about your college experience, and between Bard College and Queen's College, and then you did one in Toronto, I think.
University of Toronto. I did my PhD. Yeah.
That's where you did your PhD. So that's interesting. And we were just talking about how Queen's College. I'm from Queens.
Yeah.
My parents are both Queen's College graduates, and actually, I just remembered my brother is also a Queen's College graduate.
Oh, okay.
And if I want to try to associate myself even closer to Queen's College, my sister and I, you might remember there was at Queen's College right across the street, there's a place called Pominock.
I do not remember that.
You don't remember Pominock? So right across the street, Pominock is a whole development there. And my sister and I, my brother's 9 years younger, so he wasn't a part of this one. My sister and I used to attend classes there. They offered free classes, ballet. It was ballet classes, karate classes, gymnastic classes, and then kind of like an after-school program where you would there was like a little pool hall and older people would watch us. I say that because at the time we thought that they were like adults, but really they were probably like 18-year-olds, right? Watching us. But so I was right across the street from Queen's College, and I would go there with my father. Would take my sister and I there when we had our candy sales, and we would go there and sell all of our candy.
Clean up,
at Queen's College.
Yeah, you would clean up there.
But since we're on that topic, the PhD and college and education, and we're going to get into your background in education and the schools you founded and all the different things that are really cool in that space, and then how it translates into your coaching and your public speaking, your keynoter, all these different things. We're going to get into all of that. But like I said, while we're on the topic of PhDs, I'd love to learn more about that journey.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my first career, as these things often go. So I went to Bard College, which is we're in Poughkeepsie now. It's actually right up the river a little bit.
Is Bard in Poughkeepsie or Red Hook? I thought Bard was in Red Hook.
It is next to Red Hook. It's in the town of Annandale-on-Hudson, which I believe Bard is the town of Annandale-on-Hudson.
Okay.
And and that was quite an experience. Bard is a very, very unique place,
right?
Even to this day, in a lot of different ways. And then I left there. I did a number of things, and at some point, I actually started building sets professionally outside of Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia originally. And so I worked in a theater in Philly and then outside of Philly. I did that for a little while, and then my wife got a job. She went to law school, Temple Law School. In one summer, she graduated law school, took the bar, got married, and moved, all within just a few months. And so we moved up to Queens, because she was going to be working as a legal aid attorney, public defender in Manhattan. And Queens was affordable, Ridgewood, Queens. And I was kicking around for a little while trying to figure out what I was going to do. Got a job as a writing tutor at LaGuardia Community College, which is in Queens. Mm-hmm. Great community college. And from there, I decided, I was an English major. It's like, I really want to go in academia. So I went to Queens College, got my master's. And while I was doing that, they let me teach courses at LaGuardia. So my first teaching experience was at LaGuardia. So just to sum it up, I lived in Queens, I worked in Queens at LaGuardia, and I went to school at Queens College, which meant I took a lot of buses.
Yes.
I took buses to the bus.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Queens, and similar to you, I moved up here to the Hudson Valley when I went to college, when I went to Marist College.
Oh, Marist.
But up until that point, I used to take the train and the bus to school. And as we know with the MTA, the buses are never on time.
No.
And so you either just missed the bus that you were planning to get, or you're waiting there for an hour and probably walking to the next bus stop in order to try to just get there a little faster, or maybe to your transfer or something like that.
Absolutely.
But I somewhat miss, like, I'll say this. When you're taking public transportation, which some of our listeners do take public transportation, you really start appreciating owning a car and being able to just get in and go where you want to go when you want to get there. Because I remember being a teenager or a pre-teenager, I guess, like before I had my license. And I would stare at any car that drove by, the hooptiest of the hoopties, like hubcaps falling off, grill held together by duct tape. And I would look at that car and I'd go, I would take that car.
Yeah,
I would take that car if I don't have to take another bus, if I don't have to chase another bus. Because I literally, I'm not known for my timeliness. So I remember one morning I was in summer school and I had just missed the bus. I saw it going by me. It was on Hillside Avenue in Queens. You might know Hillside Avenue. That's a big one. On Hillside Avenue, I see it. I'm on the other side of the avenue. I see it at the stop and it's going, and I'm running towards it because I'm like, I could probably just get his attention and he'll just wait for me. Yeah, they're not waiting for you. So I get like right to the back of it, right? And this is like, remember when Superman is chasing the train in Superman 1?
Right.
Did you remember that? Clark Kent is chasing the train. He was like in high school. That was what I felt like. I got my backpack on and I'm just chugging along. I chased that bus. I gotta say, because I knew, I was like, at the light, I'll catch up. I would catch up. I would get so close to it at the light. And then it would stop at a bus stop. I'd get so close to it. I chased that bus for probably a good 4 or 5 blocks.
No.
And I finally caught that bus. I got on that bus. I swear people were cheering for me because they would see me like catch up to it. And I'm like, oh, stop the bus. So yeah. No.
Did the track coach see you?
No. Yeah. I was in really good shape at the time. I was actually a swimmer. I was a swimmer. So I had good cardio and shape at the time.
It's too bad it wasn't a boat.
Well, yeah, swim up to it. Yeah, I don't know if I would have been able to swim that much, but no, because like I said, the traffic lights and the bus stops are what helped me stay kind of like catch up and teeter back and finally catch that bus, man. I never forget that moment of catching that bus in public transportation. But so then you got your master's there. At Queens College, which is a great college in Queens. I mean, what is it, the CUNY system, right?
It's CUNY,
it'd be the CUNY system. And then what brought you to Toronto then?
I got into the University of Toronto. They threw a lot of money at me. It's an unbelievable school, incredible English program, one of the top literature programs you can get into. And they had a great library. So yeah, it was a no-brainer.
When you say they threw a lot of money at you, you're talking about scholarship, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about that. So because I think so often we hear about scholarships coming out of high school into college.
Yeah.
I don't know how often we hear about people getting scholarships for master's programs or for PhDs and how to maybe get into that. Because of course, if you're listening right now and you're looking to elevate and go through some sort of educational program, whether it's a master's program or a PhD program, this will definitely be helpful to you.
Yeah, I mean, far outside my area of expertise, but usually it's PhD programs, not so much master's programs. And it really depends on the school, the type of program. I was going to English, which is very academic.
Okay.
Right. So when there's academic programs like that, they try to attract the best people. And so they give them money to keep them there. And the job market's usually abysmal. So a lot of people even do like postdocs and they continue to get paid either by that school or another school after they get their doctorate and before they get like a real job. Mm-hmm. It's pretty complicated, but it really can vary from school to school, program to program. Mm-hmm. But it's worth looking into. Most master's programs, not really.
Not really. Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that. I would say for the master's programs, the one that I am aware of is a lot of jobs, a lot of companies will offer some sort of compensation if you take a master's program or something like that.
Right.
So So then you get your PhD. So, I want to kind of just take a step back, actually, because I'm a little, I want some clarity in your bio here. I understood that you were building sets at 18.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you also talked about being married. So did you get married young? Is that?
A little of both. So I not that young. So I
Yeah, bring us back.
I am going to give you a story. I should never tell anybody this story.
All right.
So when I was maybe I was a sophomore in high school. I was like a year behind.
And this is in Philadelphia now.
Yeah, just outside of Philadelphia, Delaware County. I was young for my class, so everybody's older than me. And I was hanging out with some friends, and we found some what's that called? Alcohol.
No.
And we drank that, and naturally. And I wrote. I remember I used to travel a lot. I used to ride my bike and walk. My high school was about 2 miles away. I walked every day. And I rode my bike home. And I remember it was fall. And the reason I remember this is because I kept my falling off my bike. And the only thing I could do is try to land in the leaves. Got home, walked in the house.
Wow, you were drunk.
Oh, I was and walked in the house. And normally, if I were in a situation where I did not want to encounter my parents, I would turn right and head toward my bedroom. But I made a mistake, and I got confused and turned left and sat down on the couch next to my mother, and then promptly fell off the couch. And my mother said to me, all upset, "Were you taking pills?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Wait, no, I wasn't," because I wasn't. And so I got in a lot of trouble, grounded for a while, all this other stuff. Then my parents said to me, "You are not involved in anything in high school. You need to get involved in something. I wasn't an athlete, so you don't worry about what you need to get some club, something." And I said, "Well, I've always been kind of interested in the stage crew." So I got involved in the stage crew. And then soon thereafter, I was made like the co-director with another kid. The two of us ran the stage crew. Leadership has always been. I always get thrust. Even as a little kid, I always got thrust in leadership positions. So I was, being the head of stage crew means, and this is no exaggeration, you are the king of the nerves. It's amazing. But I went to a Catholic boys' high school, and the girls' high school was right next door. And I had a girlfriend, and I liked to see her more often. So I integrated their stage crew into ours. So we actually had girls on stage building sets. I was way ahead of my time. And then I started volunteering at a program in the summer that was like a summer stock theater, like a community theater, that mostly had younger people in it, called Summer Stage. And I did that in the summer, and then finally they hired me to be their master carpenter when I was in college. I was building sets in college too as my work-study job. Then I became the technical director there at 18. So I was the boss. So when you're a technical director, we run everything technical. Mm-hmm. So at 18, I was thrust into that position, yet another leadership position. And actually, that's where I met my wife. When I was 19 years old when I met my wife. She came in to volunteer.
So you had broken up with the girlfriend.
Oh yeah. So I met my wife, and we weren't married yet, of course. And we hung out there for a while, and we decided to stay together. So, so I did get married fairly young. I was like 24. But okay. And then I went away from theater for a while, and then decided to get back into it professionally.
Okay. This is making a little more sense. So we both share it in common, not liking public transportation.
Actually, I do like public.
Oh, you do like it? Yes. Okay. All right.
I don't like cars. I'm the opposite.
Interesting. I think. Okay. So here's what I'll say in terms of what I just stated there is, I like public transportation for what it offers. Right. It's very valuable. Gets traffic off the road. Gets people to and from places very inexpensively. Wonderful. Right. But I don't like it because a lot of the times you have to go out of your way to get to it, which then you do need cars too. Like you need to take a cab to get to the right, or it doesn't run on time and it delays you or it takes longer. And so that's the part that I have that problem with it. Yeah. But otherwise, yes, I probably understand what you're saying in terms of liking it. And the other thing is I also went to an all boys Catholic high school.
Ah, okay.
My story is reversed from yours in that when I was drinking in high school, I ended up getting kicked out. So
Yeah. See,
I did something similar to you in that I wasn't drinking in high school. It was more of like I did something similar in that I brought the alcohol to high school to hang out with to have a little celebration at lunchtime with my friends. It was now I have to kind of clarify the story here, right, for all of our listeners, because now this just sounds like I'm a problem here. What it was that my parents never hid alcohol from us in the house, so I had access to it. It was never an issue. I never had an issue with alcohol. It wasn't something I cared to try to have or not have. If I wanted to have a drink at a family party in my teenage years, I could have one. It wasn't a problem for me. Whereas I think of many kids that I knew, it was like, going to the keg was the only time they could ever have an alcoholic beverage. And I remember I was sitting at the cafeteria, all boys Catholic high school in Queens, Archbishop Malloy, and some of those guys were talking, and they're all just like, it'd be so cool if we could have a drink at lunch.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll bring it. And they're what? I said, I'll bring it. Now, again, I am a very defiant person. And I'm like, anything to try to figure out how I could bend the rules or break the rules and get away with it was something that I enjoyed doing. It was just more of like, I got the thrill out of knowing that I can do something like that.
Yeah.
It was more that than it was to bring the alcohol to school, right? So anyway, so I did. I brought rum and Coke to school the next day, and my friends feasted, right? Like I poured out the rum and Coke to all the guys and everything, and everybody was having rum and Coke. And unfortunately, because of my hoarding, I had put it all in this really cool Arizona sports bottle. And I'm calling it hoarding because I seriously should have just thrown this thing out. It was like I bought it for $2 with the Arizona iced tea in it and drank it, washed it, and then put a rum and Coke in it, and then I didn't throw it out. So anyway, so it's a Catholic school, and as you know, it's very strict rules. So I'm going to my locker, and I have this Arizona bottle with a little bit of rum and Coke left in it because I didn't care to drink. It's like that wasn't, the point to me was just to bring it.
Sure.
So I have it, and so one of the guys comes up. He's like, "Hey, you still have any of that?" I said, "Yeah, finish it." I said, "I don't want it." So he starts drinking it. He drinks it, and then he hands it back to me. And one of the TAs is walking through the hallway. He says, "No drinking in the hallway." And somebody else who I'll never forget him. I don't want to even say his name. Well, it doesn't matter, right? Because all he did was rat me out. Mike Farina. I'll never forget his name.
Mike Farina.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
you know
rat?
Mike Farina?
No.
But he had no idea. All he had was a locker near me. He had no idea. We weren't like friends where we hung out in the cafeteria at all. We just had lockers near each other. So he had no idea what was going on. And he just says, "Yeah, don't drink any alcohol in the hallway," something like that. And
Like
TA,
as a joke.
As a joke.
Yeah.
As a total joke.
So he wasn't a rat.
No, not at all.
Bad humorous.
It's just bad humorous. And he said that, and the TA had to ask me to smell my bottle. And I was like, I said, come on, like there's nothing in here. And he goes, "Let me smell it." And long story short, which we're already past the long story part, so I don't know why I said that part, right? Yeah, they smelled it, and they're like, and I remember telling, this is what I told the dean: "You're gonna love this because you're an academic, right? You were a dean, right? You're gonna love this." So the dean pulls me in, and looking back at this, I don't see how I thought this was gonna get me out of trouble. I said, "But I didn't drink any." I said, "You could do a breathalyzer on me." He goes, "But Michael, you brought rum and Coke to school and you gave it to other underage guys." I go, "Yeah, but I didn't drink it." Thinking this is going to get me out of trouble. And it did not.
Lesson learned.
I got immediately expelled.
Wow.
Here's my favorite part, which is I'm going to throw a question at you at this one. And then we're going to get back to the learning, people. I promise. We're going to get back to the learning, but Jim and I are having a little fun here going back in the day with our booze stories, I suppose.
With two very different outcomes. By the way.
Two very
the
different.
Moral of my story is I have a 34-year happy marriage.
Right.
Out of mine.
Right. Moral of my story is I learned how to get kicked out of a school. But I believe everything happens for a reason. So here's my question for you about from a dean's perspective. Yeah. So I get kicked out of school, right? I get expelled. My life is in the gutter. I'm junior year in high school. I'm like, no college is going to take me now. Mm-hmm. My life is at the end. My parents are devastated. My mother, by the way, she's 30 years retired from New York City Board of Ed. So she's embarrassed. Yeah. right? My father is, professional also. Everybody's embarrassed in my family. It's like, don't tell anybody about this, Michael. It was like, this is the secret. Like, nobody's going to know about this. A week later, we get a call. My father goes, Mr. Lembo's on the phone, Michael. That's my old dean. And I said, okay, what's he want from me? Like, kick me out. Am I getting back in?
Yeah.
Right? Like, actually, that's exactly what I thought. So, hey, Michael, how's it going? I'm like, it's not going well, Mr. Lembo. I'm like, can I get back in? And he goes, no. He goes, what I want to know is, you said that you brought the alcohol to school. Who were the other people?
Are you kidding?
Swear to God. Who were the other people that drank from it?
And you said that guy Farina.
Yeah, right. And I said, why would I tell you this? I said, if I tell you, will I be allowed back into school? And are you going to expel them? And he was like, well, no, you're not going to be allowed back in school. And yeah, they're probably going to be expelled because they were drinking in school. And then he starts trying to throw some names out to me of like, oh, I heard this, and this person said this about you. And he was playing this game with me. And I just remember thinking, why would I, like, and I'm going to be honest here, 100% was ready to throw people under the bus. 100%. I'm going to be totally honest here. I was devastated. My life was at the end. My parents were embarrassed. Everything was, and I'm a junior year in high school. I'm ready to throw people under a bus.
Sure.
But I asked this dean, and this is where I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I said, if I tell you, would I get back in? And he just said no. And I was like, we're done here. Like,
you could have smited your enemies at that point, though, you realize.
Could have smited a lot of people, right? I mean, right?
Look, I mean, I didn't get thrown out, but I almost did. Because I got in a big fight my senior year, but it was off campus. And then somebody else trashed the same kid's locker. I mean, like, squirted some sort of ink into it or something. And they called me in, accusing me of doing this, naturally enough. I actually knew a couple people who did it, but I wasn't sure. And I wasn't going to rat them out, but they were asking me to rat them out.
Sure.
And they said, and the dean of students said to me, looked me in the eye and said to me, well, I can tell you're a straight shooter. You're not going to, you'll get in a fight, but you're not going to do this kind of thing. But I think you know who it is. So I'm going to hold you responsible until we find out who it was. And I thought to myself, you have not met my father. He's a union guy. He's going to come in here and knock your head off. Seriously, you're going to make me pay the price for something you just admitted to me. I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I went to one of the kids and I said, here's the deal. I'm not going to rat you out, but here's the deal.
Right.
I said, you do whatever you want. And to his credit, he wouldn't turn himself in.
Yeah.
And I got off the hook. But I came very close to being in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, Catholic school's a different game, man. But so I want to go now to, because to change gears here. We know we have a nice little some commonalities here.
Juvenile delinquents.
This is so nice. It's when these kind of things kind of get uncovered of like look at all the commonalities we have: public transportation, Catholic school, alcohol.
I haven't told these stories in years, and now I'm telling them on a podcast.
I know. Well, and same here. But I think the good, and we're going to get to leadership in this because I have a question for you in terms of that. But I think what's important for all of you listening right now and for our conversation is what to take from this, right? Is that we can make mistakes in our past, and we're going to continue to make mistakes. We're going to go out and make mistakes today, tomorrow, and the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, right?
It's an imperative.
Right. But what did you learn from the mistake? How did you move on from the mistake is what's important. And we're two professionals sitting across from each other right now who started our own business, who left careers, started our own businesses, and you're in Master Networks. You're part of an association where you're well respected, asked to be a presenter. I was brought in to be a presenter. We're well respected professionals today. And I think that goes to show that we can make mistakes, but how do we learn from it? And how do we move beyond it? How do we take our mistakes, be true to our mistakes as well? Because we're both sharing, we're both being vulnerable now, we're both being truthful. This is a mistake that we made, that I made, and owning it.
Right.
Owning this mistake, realizing, hey, like I said, I was ready to throw them under the bus, realizing that these aren't the right actions in my life. How do I change them? And it doesn't happen right away,
Mhm.
because from my journey, which I'd love to hear yours too. It didn't happen right away. It took me many
Sure.
years. It took me a marriage
Mhm.
to teach me that I needed to change. And I didn't get married to my wife till I was 31.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I got married, and she is just a brilliant woman. She's a teacher, a special ed teacher.
Mhm.
And I think that's what's changed everything, because she knows how to psychologically work with me, of like plant the seed of change. And like 6 months later, she's noticing, it's working. And she gives it that time to change. And so much has happened from there. You were 19 years old, and you were leading major groups in the theater.
I wouldn't say major, but I was in charge.
Well, the reason why I put the word major in there is I'm just thinking, I'm thinking back at those days, and it's got to be anywhere from 10 to 30 kids, right? In your group, in your theater group?
In the theater, no. I mean, it was a lot more than that. It wasn't just kids; it was adults too.
Right, and so that's my point. So you have a lot of people that you're leading, right, at 19 years old. I'm also thinking about personalities in all of this. You have egos that you're managing.
Mhm.
You have this is kind of like teen years. So not just egos, but this is where gossip and cliques and groups are
Drama.
very important.
Don't forget the drama.
That's the point. The
theater.
Drama that comes, well, yeah, that too, right? But the drama that comes from all of that you're managing. And so what I'm interested in, as you look back with what you have right now in terms of your leadership capabilities and knowledge and all the years experience, when you look back at 19-year-old Jim as a leader, what do you see as some of the qualities that you had, or that you had to learn in those moments?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. I will tell you my biggest mistake is I didn't go back the following summer when I was 20 to do the same job, because I realized that summer the greatest claim to fame of Summer Stage in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania was in Summer Stage that year. And that was Tina Fey.
Oh, wow.
So I missed her by a year.
Wow.
I looked this up because she was like a kid then. She's a little younger than me. And then we had a bunch of kids who volunteered. I thought, I wonder if she was one of those kids, but she wasn't. So recently I wrote, so I have a newsletter and podcast. And basically, I write this newsletter every week and I read it because some people like to hear my voice, especially me. And so I've been thinking a lot about that journey. I was a leader from like in Boy Scouts. I was pushed into a top Boy Scout troop leadership position when I was like a tenderfoot and like 12 years old or something, just bizarre. So I've always had this kind of thrust upon me, and I was pretty good at it. I was a faculty leader when I was a faculty member. I was running our faculty governance system. I was asked to lead our reaccreditation. Every 10 years, you have to get reaccredited. I was put in charge of that, which was all good. And I could do that. I did well, my leadership was all intuitive, right? My dad was a leader. He was a union leader. He had his union local. So I had that example, sort of. He didn't talk about leadership, but I just had that example. But but I just had this sort of gut leadership, I call it, right? Like you just know how to lead. You know how they say some people are born leaders? I don't think that's true, but I think some people are more intuitive leaders than others, right? Wherever that comes from. You learn leadership. It's not all gut, but it's, a lot of it was gut. And when I became a dean, that's when I realized that I really had to step it up, right? The stakes went up a lot higher. Now I have a bunch of people working for me, and they're all professors, and it's, wow, this is a big deal. So and what happened was I was a faculty leader. There's a school outside of Baltimore you never heard of. And there was we'd been a college and we became a university. In fact, I was put in charge of creating all the schools, which I did. The president said to me, just take a few of your fellow faculty members and just divide up the university into these schools. And I thought, that is the stupidest idea I ever heard in my life. It's like, yes, I could do that in 5 minutes, but there'll be hell to pay forever after, And so what I did was I was in charge of our faculty governance system, because universities faculty have a lot of power. And so I happened to be the chair that year. And so what I did was I empowered the faculty council to be a committee of the whole to deal with this issue. And then we held for like a whole semester, we held weekly meetings in the evening. So you had the faculty council there, which was a representative group, and we invited the entire campus. Anybody could come. And we publicized this. So faculty were there, administrators were there at all levels. And one time there were even students there, and they were, totally, and we were just asking people's opinions. And we just worked it out slowly. So by the time we did it, by the time we divvied everything up, everybody was on board. We had buy-in, right? Because I knew if I just did it, it would have gotten done. And I always resent that statement that leaders get things done. Well, everyone gets things done. There's nothing spectacular about that. But it isn't the getting done that makes you a leader. It's how you do it. It's why you do it, right? It's what you do. It's not just getting stuff done. So then they said to me, okay, well, we want you to be the dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, which you've surmised did not exist, right? So I was the founding dean. And okay, great. That was easy, right? I had 15 disciplines, I think 6 or 7 departments, I can't remember. It's a lot, but it's just a matter of putting this with that. It's just nuts and bolts. Like this goes with that and that goes with this. That's easy. What was hard was getting it up and running and keeping it running.
Right.
That requires leadership, right? And so this is when I'm realizing all my leadership to date is not cutting it here. This is not going to work. I've got good instincts, but I need to learn a lot more. I can get us going, but how am I going to sustain this? And I looked to the president of the school, the provost, who I reported to as a dean, and they were bosses. And I make a very strict distinction between bosses and leaders.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I can go on and on.
We'll talk about that in a
yeah,
bit.
please.
Keep going.
And so they were bosses. They were not good role models. I wasn't getting any mentoring to speak of, no guidance, no models. I really hadn't had very many really good bosses in my life at any level. A couple small exceptions. And I looked at my peers, my fellow deans, and they were kind of flailing around wildly, and I sort of imitated them for a while. You know how you know what you're doing, so you kind of go, wow, they look like they know what they're doing. You follow them, and they were. I found myself micromanaging and becoming a perfectionist and a workaholic and all these things I abhorred. And I thought, this is not me. And I had a break one day, and what happened was it was my second semester as a dean, and we had this department called Human Services. And Human Service had outside advisory committee. This is all sounds like a lot of inside baseball. Basically, these are people who worked in the human services field, and we would invite them in, and they would advise us on the curriculum. It was mostly to keep up relationships so we could get internships. And so we'd bring the campus like once a semester. And so we have in this room, we have a little continental breakfast and a little chit chat. And my role there is purely ceremonial. There's a department chair, and I'm just there in my suit. I used to wear suits with French cuffs and all that. I was a pretty natty dresser. And we sit down at the beginning of the meeting. The department chair says, "Oh, our dean wants to say something." And I welcome everybody, blah, 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 blah. And my role is to get out of there. So, because it's department chairs, it's not my thing, And I said, so, and I'm sorry I have to leave you. I'd love to stay, but I have to go put out a fire. And everybody goes, "Oh, yeah, put out fire." Like, "Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we have it hard too. Yeah, we're all busy. Yeah. And I walk out, like, I'm putting out a fire. And I'm walking across campus to go to my office. And I'm thinking, okay, I got to go put out this fire. What's that fire? I had to make a phone call. This is the fire I'm going to put out.
Oh, that's all it was. It was just a phone call. Oh, it wasn't a phone call about anything.
No, it was nothing. It wasn't even an important phone call.
But you had to make as though.
Right. It did. And I realized that everyone around me talked like that. Everything was a crisis all the time. Everything was up. And it just hit me like, when everything's a crisis, nothing's a crisis, right? Your priorities are all flat. It doesn't matter whether they're high or low. Everything's the same level, right? If everything's like, anybody you ask, like, how you doing? Oh, I'm real busy today. Oh, sucking wind, whatever they're saying. They always had these things. One dean always said, "Oh, I'm ducky," she would say, very sarcastic because she's so busy. And I realized this is nonsense. This is nonsense. There's very few crises in higher ed, especially on the academic side. On student affairs, sure, because you get your juvenile delinquents like you drinking. But, you know, like
I didn't drink. I only brought it for everybody else.
You brought it for everyone else, right? You deal it. But on the academic side, rarely anything comes up where you really like it's so urgent, it's a crisis. And I thought, oh my God, I've been lying to myself and everyone else. And then I realized all my people were talking the same way, all my department chairs and whatnot. And so I banned the word crisis. I said, unless you come to me with an actual crisis, I don't want to hear the word crisis. And so we worked on that. But that's when I realized that I need to become a real leader. And so I started studying leadership. I started reading books. I started going to trainings, talk to people about leadership, meeting some people. I didn't really have models, like I said, so it wasn't like I gained anything from campus. Our president had a leadership program that he put me in on campus that was, well, this shows you how stupid it was. We used Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is fine. It's a good book, right? And every month we would meet together and we'd read a chapter and talk about it. And the person who led each one of those sessions changed from month to month, and they were all his vice presidents because he had so many. He had one for every chapter, and there's a lot of chapters, right? Which is absurd in itself. And he and some of these people, like, because they have their vice president, they're a leader. I can assure you, this was not the case.
Right. I mean, and you're just talking about how you're in it. You're wanting to change because the people around you are part of the issue, and you're being taught or led by the people around you.
Right. So I needed help. And there was no place to get help, and I had to go find it. So I started treating, I didn't think of it in these terms at the time, but I started treating leadership like a discipline, right? My first discipline was English. I started thinking of leadership as something to be studied and mastered. And I made a lot of mistakes. You asked about mistakes before. I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned from my mistakes. But I also discovered it's very important to learn from other people's mistakes as well, right? I looked at my bosses. I looked at my fellow deans, and frankly, they weren't very good, with a couple exceptions, right? They weren't very good. And so I learned from them what not to do. And I call that learning from the negative paradigm, right? The idea that it isn't just your own mistakes. Learn, you see something that's not going well, think about why not. And it's usually not do the opposite. That's a trap people fall into. Oh, they're going left, I need to go right. No. You might need to go straight or just sit still or go backwards or maybe wait a little while, then go left, whatever. But don't do it their way. Don't just replicate what you see. And that's what people do all the time. I think that's why there's so many bad bosses in the world, because people just replicate their bad boss's behavior. Simon Sinek says, be the boss you wish you had, right? I would go further. Don't be the boss you wish you didn't have, right? I mean, it's both sides of that thing. You've got to think about what you don't do. A lot of leadership advice is about what to do. I give a lot of advice on what not to do. A lot of my podcast is about what you don't do, right? In fact, most of it is. It's don't do these things because these are bad behaviors. And so it's not just about making the right choices in terms of what you're going to do, deciding not to do the bad stuff. Because some people, they do all this stuff over here and it looks really good, but so on the left hand they're doing great, on the right hand they're still doing bad. Because it's just a gimmick.
Yeah. So I like this approach of what not to do, and it's interesting. There's two things that come to mind with what you're talking about here. One of which I'm gonna go back to something that you said originally, which I thought was a really great thing to do. So to not complicate, not to confuse the two is what I'm going to say here, is on one of the things that you said as a leader is when forming this new school, you brought everyone in. And by doing that, it became part of something that they built and they were more bought in. And I follow someone, Brennan Burchard. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his work. He says people fight for what they create. Right. And it's so true. When you let someone create something, they're more apt to fight for it. It just makes sense, right? It's like, I created this. Why wouldn't I fight for it? It's got my input in it. Right. So I think that that's a really great example of good leadership. Is as a leader, rather than telling your students, your mentees, your vice principals, your whoever you're managing, whoever you're leading, telling them what to do, asking them questions.
Yeah.
Asking them questions as to, what do you think we should do?
Right.
What should we do?
Right.
What are your thoughts on this topic? How do you think is a better way to open a sale? You know, asking them an open-ended question to get them to respond is going to have so much more buy-in.
Right.
I see it with, so I coach basketball, my daughter's basketball team, third and fourth graders. And I see it with them when, because this is always an ongoing work for us, right? When I tell them to do something, I get a lot of pushback. And the pushback could be, oh, do we have to do that? Or, oh, can we do it this way? Or whatever it is, but I get pushback. When I ask them, hey, girls, which drill do you want to do? And I say, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. And I give them the option of which drill, because there has to be some sort of structure. They're all in. When they pick that drill, it's like they're all in.
Yeah.
And so it's incredible. You see it right away with little kids. So I think that's a really great example of what to do as a leader. I think that's a really, really great example that you bring up there.
And that's a teacher's trick too, by the way.
Go ahead.
To offer people options, right? If you say to somebody, I want you to, as an English professor, you have to assign you have to write on this topic. If I say you have to write on this topic, nothing but pushback. But if I say, choose one of these 3,
right,
no problem.
No problem. Yeah, and I also think it speaks to when you say 3 or 2 or more. 2 to 3 is probably good, because otherwise people get hung up on so many choices.
Sure.
I think it speaks to their different pleasures, right? Like, what is it? Like, maybe in those writing, you have one that's a fiction, one that's a nonfiction, one that's a fantasy. It's like, okay, one of those 3 I'm going to relate with. One of those 3 is going to speak to me and say, oh, I want to talk fantasy, or I want to talk nonfiction, or I want to talk fiction, which I know nonfiction and fantasy are a little bit the same, but we're speaking off the cuff here. I want to go now to what you were just talking about, which is what not to do. And again, I'm reminded of Brennan's teaching here of there is so much wisdom out in the world, and to learn from it, right? So we just talked about learning from the wisdom of letting people fight for what they create, but now also the wisdom of the mistakes that they make. And I'm very interested, because you really go deep into this in your boss versus leader. And I know that there's a lot of what not to do when we talk about bosses. And I think you spoke a little bit about this just now in terms of your example and your story there, but I'd love to kind of go back to this bosses versus leader idea that you have.
Yeah. So the way I always put it, because it's so clear, and tell me if you disagree, there are very few bosses in the world who were actual leaders in any real sense, aside from their title, right? And there are even fewer who are great leaders. And yet, at the same time, there are very many leaders who are not bosses, including great ones, and will never be a boss. What do those 2 words have to do with one another? Nothing. So I make a strict dichotomy between bosses and leader. You can't be a boss and be a leader. You can be a manager or an executive or a director and have that title and be a leader. You must be. And you can be a leader without any of those titles. Bosses, that's a title. So these 2 words have nothing to do with each other. And yet we've tangled them up together. And you constantly hear about, oh, she's the leader of the organization. She's the CEO. Well, she's the CEO, but is she the leader of the organization? That remains to be seen. That's a whole different question. Bossing is a title, right? As is manager, director, any of those, right? Executive. Those are titles. Leadership is an attitude and a set of behaviors, right? And it's not just the attitude. Some people think it's an attitude. No, it's attitude and the set of behaviors. You have to behave like a leader. And it's really hard. You said something earlier. You said, we have to keep doing this. Yeah. It's a constant self-improvement, self-questioning, self-evaluation. In education, there's something called the feedback loop of assessment, right? You look at something, you analyze it, you decide whether it's good, and then you close the loop. You start all over again. It's just like that. Just like that. Constant. You constantly have to be checking, does this work? Something can work today and not work tomorrow. Right. Something can work in this situation, not that one. This organization, not that one. These set of people, not that one. You need to be thinking about this. But if you're coming from a good place, that's good. It's not good enough. If you're coming from a good place and you apply that good place, like you use that and you make that who you are and how you behave, then you're on the track to good leadership.
Going to the bosses piece, because I think I don't disagree with you, right? But I do think that there could be some misunderstanding in what you're describing here. And so I'd like to just kind of elaborate on this a little bit more, or have you elaborate on this a little bit more, in that I think when we're talking about professional development, personal development, we kind of have to make these distinctions, and it's intentional. It's not to disparage, it's not to take away from someone's capabilities or what they do, but we have to make these very clear distinctions in order for us to figure out what it is that we need to work on and improve. And I think that what you just said is you're making a very clear distinction as to someone who is perhaps promoted or hired to come in and evaluate people below them. We're going to say that intentionally, people below them, because that's another term that a boss would, rather than a leader would look at everybody on the same level and same playing field. But they're hired, they're promoted to evaluate people beneath them, and to maybe have some sort of evaluation metric, where number of phone calls, I'm going to sales because that's where my background is, number of phone calls, number of deals closed, number of people in a pipeline, and they have this metric. And they come in with the mindset of, I'm going to get you to make X amount of phone calls, to meet with X amount of people, and to close X amount of deals. And by way of doing that is going to be, we're going to have weekly meetings, and you're going to tell me who you spoke with, and you're going to tell me how many calls you made, and you're going to tell me what deal is closing. And at the end of that meeting, I'm going to tell you if you did a good job or a bad job, and then I close my door. And if I hope that I made a very clear picture, and if I didn't,
you did.
Yeah, right. The clear picture is simply, we're going based off of a metric. We're not offering there, and I don't want to again disparage anybody, because there might be some sort of support, or at least you think you're providing support. You think that you're empathizing, you think that you're supporting, but at the end of the day, all you care about is the metric. And if this employee doesn't meet the metric, they're probably going to be terminated or put on some sort of plan and then get terminated. And you do care. I don't want to remove the idea that you don't care as a person, because if you're listening to this, you care. You're listening to this podcast because you care and you want to learn. But the person that we're talking about, they are essentially just doing their job. They're plugging in the numbers into a system, and that's it. And I think that the distinction that you're making is that that's the boss that we're talking about, right? That's the boss that we're talking about. We're talking about people that follow this metric, that just follow and are essentially droning on.
Right.
And then we have leaders. And I kind of just helped clarify what you're talking about in terms of boss. Could you give us exactly the exact opposite? And I know you don't want to do binary. I know you don't want to do binary, but I do want.
Actually, I love binary.
I want this binary intentionally for everybody listening here. Of, we have this. Why don't we play it out this way? Because this is, you're a coach, and I love this. So we're actually going to coach this. We're going to have a little fun here. So we have this manager I just described. I'm coming to you as a client of yours, right? And maybe I'm telling you, hey, Jim, I actually have this manager. He's a great manager. He runs the numbers with us. He sits in a room with us, and we go through all the numbers. And some people, they just don't do their job and they get terminated.
Right.
And I'm on track here, and I'm probably going to be able to take his role because he's up for a management position. I'm going to take his role, and I'm looking to do exactly what he's doing. But I'm coming to you because I want to make sure that I am the best leader in this organization, just like he is. And I'm interested as to how you would help paint the picture for me of what maybe I should or shouldn't do.
We would have a very long and difficult conversation
Yes.
about what is it you mean by leader there.
Right.
Again, this idea that leaders get things done, right?
Yeah.
That's not the metric. Leaders do get things done, but they get things done a certain way. And what's your end game? If your end game is to hit the numbers, okay, that's great. But you're not really being a leader. You're just hitting the numbers. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it yourself or you're driving other people to do it. That's not leadership. That's hitting numbers. And I can go on and on about numbers, by the way. There's something about Goodhart's law. If you ask me about that, we'll just keep talking for the next hour. But if you're just driven to hit the numbers, okay, you're going to hit the numbers. But that isn't leading people. Do you want that next person to be able to foster relationships? Is that important to the organization? Now, perhaps it isn't. If it's not, we probably wouldn't be talking. Because I primarily deal with people who are in organizations that on some level are values driven.
Yeah,
mission driven.
Let's assume that just for the idea,
Okay.
for the sake of this exercise here,
Okay.
let's assume that you probably had like a pre-call with this person, because as a coach, we want to ask a lot of questions. And you already just did it. You said, what's the end goal? What's driving? You're already asking some questions.
Right.
So we want to have a good dialogue based off of questions.
Right.
And from there, you find that, yes, it is good-hearted, good value-driven organization. Maybe they're tied to some sort of investment group that puts these numbers over their heads and they don't know any other way. They want to know another way, and that's why they're reaching out to you.
Right.
And so I'm interested in how do we support these goals?
Mhm.
How would you help them support these goals of these numbers
Mhm.
and keep their values intact of, like you said, relationships and
Yeah.
values?
You've introduced a wrinkle here that may be insurmountable, right? Because there's this dichotomy between what the company says it stands for and these investors
Mhm.
who are really driving the company,
Mhm.
right? So if the company says, oh, we're about, we want to have employees who work here because they want to work here and do their job because they want to do it, and they're not just here about the money or the job or the benefits or something like that, or the titles. They really want to be invested here because we value our customers and we want to show that through the way we value our employees.
Mhm.
But then these investors come in and say, we want you to hit these metrics,
Yeah.
come hell or high water, right? There's a problem here at this organization. There's a split.
But isn't that the reality of any organization? Like, I mean, even us as solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, right? When you think about it, whether it's an investment group that comes in and tells us to hit these numbers, or it's our mortgage payment or
Mhm.
our electric bill or our spouse that says, hey, groceries, are you going to pay for them? At some point, we have a metric that we have to hit.
Sure.
So how do we foster what you're talking about of helping people create and support them in reaching these goals as leaders?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about this as a hypothetical, right?
Yeah. Well,
But-
I'll give you a non-hypothetical.
Okay.
So, and maybe you could evaluate it then.
Yeah.
So the way that I approach it with my team, so I have my insurance company and I have a team,
Right.
and we literally just had a sales call Thursday morning, a sales training call that I did with them. And one of the things that we're working on right now is building out our list of new prospects.
Okay.
New prospects to call on. And I asked them, how many new prospects do you think you need to call on in order to close the sale?
Okay.
Right. So yes, you're with me here, right? So I asked them a question. How many do you think? Right. And they're kind of like looking at me, not unsure. And I said, is it fair to say 10 out of 100? And they said, yeah, that sounds about fair. 10 cold prospects. 100 cold prospects. 10 out of those could probably turn into a deal. Of course, we're just kind of cutting through the 25 that made appointments with us and that we met
Right.
with down to the 10 that closed the sale, right? I said, okay, cool. So 10. I said, so if we set a goal for ourselves, what would be a fair goal in terms of commissions? What would be a fair goal for the end of the year for you? For like, we're just talking about 12-month span here, not, it is end of January, so it is fair to say end of year. I said, what's a good commission goal? So they came up with a commission goal, right? And I helped guide them in that as well, because again, so what we did, here's the reality of exactly what we did. I know what they want to earn, but I also know the reality of the habits that they're currently in. And we're going to talk about your tiny habits.
Okay.
I also know the reality of the habits that they're currently in, that they're not going to earn that.
Right.
So I said, great. So let's just call it a 6-figure goal, right? And I said, $100,000, 6-figure goal. And they're like, yeah, of course, right? I said, okay, great. But we're not living in the habits to get to that goal.
Right.
So what we're going to make that goal is we're going to call it a BHAG. And I explained to them what BHAGs are, big, hairy, audacious
Right.
goals. We're going to call it a BHAG. And maybe it's our 2-year, 3-year goal, because we're going to start today on creating the habits to get us there. But what's a more realistic goal?
Right.
30, 40, 50 grand, right? Somewhere around there is more of a realistic goal. Okay, what are the habits that we need to create? So we start talking about that. And I'm having a dialogue with them.
Right.
What are some of the habits?
Yeah.
And it's ask for referrals. It's ask friends and family. It's call people. It's build out this list.
Right.
And of course, as we get to building out the list, they're looking at me going, but in order to get that 100,000, I'm going to need like 300-400 people to call on. How do I get there? I said, great. Do you know 10 people? And they said, yeah, of course I know 10 people. I said, do you know 10 people that you can call today or text today that will respond to you today? I said, yeah, great. So I made time for them, put this list together of 10 people. So they did. We made some time. They put this list together of 10 people. I said, so if you call these 10 people, they will pick up the phone, respond to your text, and they'll meet with you. Yes, they will. Okay, great. I said, so if you do this now, you meet with these 10 people, would you be open to sharing with them what you do?
Right.
And they said, yeah, I would be. Okay, great. So this is the assignment that I gave them. I said, now this is where my values come in. So my values are integrity and relationship. It's actually what you just brought up. I said, the first thing you're going to do is reach out to these people and you're going to tell them, and transparency is also one of our core values. You're going to tell them why you're reaching out. Hey, I'm reaching out because I set this really great big goal for myself this year to sell this amount of policies. And I'm hoping that you might be able to help me do that. That's one. The next step is learn about them, build a relationship. It's been a while since we talked last or whatever. What's new in your life? What's going on with you? Empathize with them, listen to them, be a part of the conversation, be authentic with them in that conversation, be present with them. If they tell you they're having a great day, awesome. How can I make it better? Who can I refer to you to make it better? They tell you they're having an awful day. What's going on that's so awful? How can I be a sounding board for you and hear what you're saying and listen and internalize what you're saying? You do all of that. And at the end of that, then you can say, whatever it is, however the conversation goes, the person's going to ask back. So you said that you had this big goal for the year. How can I help you with it? And you tell them, could you refer 3 people to me? If we take those 10 people and they refer 3 people, that's 30 people. And if we do that over and over and over again, we're going to build our list of 100 to 300 people. And they're not going to be cold. They're actually going to be warm. So going back to the whole leadership piece of this whole thing, one, I just gave you a little bit of sales training, everybody.
Yes.
But on the leadership side, a lot of what we did as a team was I asked questions and they gave me answers. And based off of those answers, I built upon those answers using sales strategy. Using the sales strategy of, okay, what about doing this? Here's a question that came up from them. Okay, Michael, you want us to call these people, you want us to build an authentic relationship, but then you also want us to ask them for 3 referrals. And I said, yes. And they said, but what if it doesn't feel natural? And I said, then don't ask. And they kind of looked at me. And they went, but then how do we get the 3 referrals out of them? I said, build a relationship. So what's a relationship look like for you? Is it to call them weekly? Is it to call them monthly? Is it to stop by and have coffee with them? What does the relationship look like for you? Build that relationship, and it might not happen on the first call. It might take 3 calls. It might take 3 months. But if you start planting the seeds now of building the relationship with these people, eventually you'll get 1 referral. You'll get 2 referrals. You'll get 3 referrals. You'll have now 10, 20, 30 people that have turned into relationships that are feeding you the leads that you need. And it's not because you're asking. It's not because you're demanding. It's not because I'm demanding or asking. It's because you're building relationships and you're being transparent with your goal with these relationships. You're letting them know, hey, I care about you as a human, right? And I'm going to reciprocate, right? Because part of what I just said was, if you tell me, hey, business is going good because I work with these kinds of clients, and I say, hey, I have 3 people I could refer to you, I'm going to refer them to you. I'm going to give them to you. And I tell my team, do that. Give as much as you can, because that person on the other end is going to receive it. And they're going to think about you every time that they receive it. And every time they receive it, they're going to go, man, how can I help Jim out? Man, how can I help Jim out? And eventually they're going to help you out, as long as you continue that relationship. Because once you stop that relationship, then they're not going to remember you anymore. You've got to continue the relationship. So anyway, so back to your coaching in all of that. What do you see as good? What do you see could use improvement?
Based on what you just said?
Yeah.
First off, that's a terrible hypothetical. So okay. That's great. I mean, that's exactly right. But that's very different from what we were talking about before, where it was, somebody in an office kind of saying, I want these numbers hit.
And I was saying the opposite. Yeah. What's the opposite of that?
That is the opposite,
exactly.
Right? In that structure. The only thing I would say that you might want to think about improving is at the very end there, you said, how can I help Jim? And the best referrals are when the person says, how can I help Bob? Oh, you should meet Jim.
Right. Yes, I love that.
That's even, but be that as it may. I mean, that structure, that's perfect. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
when you're connecting people to each other.
I mean,
love
you're
that.
giving them, you're giving them ownership, right? We talked about that
Yes.
before, right? So that's all great. But now imagine, I'll give you a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Now imagine that there is some overlord. It could be investors, it could be a company, it could be a boss you have, right? Who comes in and says, hey, Michael, you're doing great. You're hitting all your metrics. The metrics have changed. I need you to hit these numbers by next month, hell or high water, or you're fired, right? That's an untenable situation, right? I mean, what would you do in that situation?
It's interesting because what you're saying brings up some memories for me. It's funny. I feel like I'm being interviewed now, which I love, which is kind of cool because I never really get to do that on my show. What's interesting is one of the things I want to make a note of with what you said earlier was to learn from other people's mistakes and learn from what they did and do it differently. Maybe not do the opposite, but do it differently. And you're right. I'm not doing it the opposite. I am doing it differently because I did work in an insurance organization where the manager was exactly what I described earlier.
I suspected.
It was we had our red, yellow, and green spreadsheet, and it was like you listed your red, yellow, and green, and red was like they're closing next week. Yellow was like they're really warm and ready to close, and green was like we're still grooming them, right? And we would go through this, the metric and everything. We would have the roundtable discussions where, like I said, they feel like they're supporting us, but truly all they want to get down to is how many deals are you closing this week, right? They're like, oh, tell me about that meeting with Jim. How was it? Oh, you got to know him. All right, is he going to be closing? It's like they make that fake empathy, and that's what I want to make sure my team doesn't do. Is I don't want fake empathy. I want if it doesn't feel right to ask for the referral, don't ask.
Which, by the way, is brilliant.
Right?
That's brilliant. That's perfect.
I appreciate that, but it's because it's what's true in the moment, right? What's true in the moment. So back to this example that I had given earlier is the organization that we're speaking about is an insurance company, one of the biggest brokers in the country. And for purposes of this podcast, people know my history, but for purposes of this podcast, I'm not going to name them because of what I'm saying right now.
Everyone's Googling right now.
Yeah. That'd be cool if people actually Googled me. Maybe one day. Anyway, this organization was once a grassroots type of insurance organization that was just like a bunch of guys.
I've heard this so many times.
Right? That kind of came together. And they were like, hey, let's put our insurance books together. Let's make this really big one. We'll get some really great profit sharing. We'll be able to offer more resources to our clients, and really had this wonderful idea. And it was so good that eventually, as they aged out and were ready to get out of the business, they sold. But they didn't sell the whole company. They actually kept half of the company, or somewhat, right? Like some sort of half of the company. But they sold to an investor company, what's it called? What are those investor firms, right? Yeah, I know, I can't even think of the word right now. But anyway, VC, the venture capitalist, right? And this venture capitalist was taught to us as being a very kind venture capitalist of we put the customer first and we stick to the values of that organization. And don't worry about us. Like as you go into training, it's like, don't worry about us. We're just the money behind it all. But, just go do the right thing by the customer.
It's like being a kind mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah. And you soon find out after training that, you got to hit the metric because this is just like, I was there 3 months, I think, and I had already seen 2 different salespeople that I had come in with gone. Right. So I experienced what you're talking about. And I saw my leader, or I saw my manager, in the same respect that you're talking about. I was like, he's not a leader, right? He's not really leading us. He went on meetings with me and he just takes the meeting on his own. Like he just pushes me to the side as though I don't know what I'm doing here, right? When meanwhile, I'm the one who got us the meeting and I'm the one who did all the prep work to get into here. And instead of making me look good, you are making me look good because you don't want to lose the sale. You're like, oh yeah, Michael's got your back. But you're not making me look good by Michael is knowledgeable, right? So you're not leading, you're again managing, you're taking charge, you're doing, like you said earlier. And so I witnessed a lot of this. So back to your question now of the hypothetical, which wasn't hypothetical for me, which was which is
why I said it wasn't a good hypothetical.
Yeah, which was very clear to me of I'm in a position where, I'm making my dream income, my 6 figures that I used to write down in my notepad every single day. So I'm going to earn 6 figures. I'm going to earn 6 figures. My Brian Tracy that I used to follow, Brian Tracy, Brian Tracy, right?
No.
He's leadership and sales guru and mentor. He's in his 80s now. He's been around for a long time, but Write it down. Write that. I earn 100,000. I finally made it. Right. I'm earning $100,000+ at this company, and yet I was so unhappy. I was so unhappy.
How about that?
I was so unhappy. Not because of the work that I was doing. The work I was doing, I thought was amazing. Like I learned so much about the insurance business while at this company. I learned things about the insurance business that I never thought I would learn about. The way to insure buildings and the way that you coverage works and policies work and how you can actually create policies for companies that need them. Because what we're talking about at this company was I'm selling policies that are worth over $500,000. Policy, like this is just your building policy. This is, these are multi-million-dollar organizations that we're working with.
Yeah.
So we're building things for them to cover them properly. It was just amazing work. But on the other side of it, the way that we were managed, the way that we were supported or lack thereof, I was miserable. Yeah. And so I had a decision, to your point, where it did come to that, where I'm meeting with management on a regular basis. Where are your numbers? And here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm doing. And I'm not pushing that person because I'm not going to push them. And I'm being very clear with them. They're not ready. I'm not doing it. Give me time to work with them and I'll do it. And I was fortunate in that I still had a very good relationship. I had closed some good deals and I had a good relationship with them. But I was unhappy.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to start my insurance company, Den 10. I knew I wanted to. But it drove me there faster. To where your question of leaving, would I leave, was what I looked at as like, I'm going to make a 5-year plan out of this and put $500,000 in a bank account, turn into a 1-year plan.
Yeah.
Turn into a 1-year plan very quickly. And I'm going to tell you that even before it was a 1-year plan, it was like a 7-month plan. At 7 months, I was like, I am ready to leave and start my organization. Quit and start my organization. Yeah. And my wife was like, can you at least make 12 months, please? So I stayed for 12 months. I literally, to the day of being hired, I quit. But to your question there, I don't know if quitting is the right answer, because for me, it was quitting because I knew I wanted to start something. So quitting might not be the right answer. If I look back at this question here of what do you do, I think you try as hard as you can to lead the way and stay true to your values. Right. And if at the end of the day they fire you, then they fire you. But I think the most important part is that you stay true to who you are and keep your integrity intact.
I've literally been there. My last job, I got fired.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Should I? I rarely bring this out in public. So this is my debut.
This is your debut.
This is why I left Higher Ed. I was the number 2 to the president. I was the vice president for academic affairs, which is also called provost. Right. And it was my second gig at this. I'd left another one where the president came in and everybody left. And so I started this job and I kind of took it in desperation. I could just smell there's something wrong with this school. It's a little school in Kentucky, very rural area, very impoverished area, Appalachia, which is fine. That's cool. Right? You're providing Appalachian kids. These kids need help giving them an education. I love it. But, I just smelled something wrong. Like, for instance, when I interviewed on campus, the president wasn't there. I'd interviewed a lot of times for these kinds of jobs for years, and I don't think I ever had a situation where the president wasn't there to meet her potential number 2. Just unheard of, right? She just wasn't there. She interviewed me by like Zoom or some other, whatever, video, and she was asking these absurd questions. Then she lowballed me on the salary, but I held firm, still took a big pay cut, but tried to lowball me on the salary. She was playing all kinds of games. And she was a bully. She was a gaslighter. I can fight bullies. I know how to fight bullies. You can't fight a bully boss. You can't. It's like a cop on the street. It's like they have all the power, or teacher, right? You can't fight the teacher if you're a student, if the teacher's a bully. Because they have all the power, and it's the same thing with the boss, And so it was a very ugly situation, and yet I was trying to be true to my values. My charge was the faculty and academics. I was in charge of everything academic, except that there was another vice president who she had split that person off from a previous person in my position. And so some of the academic stuff was under her, which was very, very strange structure. And that was the president's favorite, of course. That was her favorite person. And so I stayed true to myself, and I worked with the faculty. One of the hardest things to do in a university is get faculty to accept change. Right? They are allergic to change. I can go on and on. And it's not all, it's not really their fault. A lot of it's their training, their reward system, everything they do is very narrow focused, very narrow board. Anything outside of that seems superfluous, right? You know, you write a dissertation, and it's about this tiny little subject, and then you get a job teaching this subject, and all your research is on this subject, and you get promoted, you get tenure because of this subject, and you don't really care about anything else. You know, I get all that. But I was always able to work with the faculty because I got them to buy in, right? And how do I get them to buy in? I would focus them on the mission. I used to start faculty meetings off and say, okay, I'm putting the mission statement up on screen. Let's talk about these words here, right? Literally like I'm running a class. And by the way, if you can find a distinction between leaders and teachers, I want to hear it. And you know, I'd say, what do these words mean to you? And we'd focus on, like, we'd do little deep dives, 2-3 minutes into the mission, right? Just to get people focused on the bigger picture. Because when you're in a narrow bore area, you can't see the big picture. And that's one of the reasons faculty resist change. And so once they could see the big picture and where they fit in and how what they did had an effect on the big picture and vice versa, all of a sudden, now they have a totally different perspective. These are really good-hearted, willing, dedicated professionals, smart people, many of whom could make a lot more money doing something else, especially at a school like that. They could make a lot more money. Right. I mean, these were dedicated. They worked their tails off. Right. Treat them like that. One day, almost exactly 3 years ago to the day, by the way, it was January 31st. President walks in my office out. This is after she had gone a long stint of gaslighting that was so bad that people came to me and asked me about what was going on. It was so obvious what she was doing.
Could you explain the gaslighting, or in that, at least in that context?
Yeah. So gaslighting is when someone basically causes you to doubt reality. They kind of twist reality. It's usually somebody has some sort of influence over you, and they kind of, you say, well, the sky's blue, and they say, are you sure? It looks a little green to me. But they do it in a very subtle way, or maybe not so subtle. In this case, it wasn't always so subtle.
And to where you're saying, oh, okay, the sky is green.
Or you're thinking, well, maybe I'm a little confused, or well, they mean well. You know, it's a tool of bullying. Okay, like several other things, but it's a tool bullies use. And so it's a way of just sort of twisting things that you're just like, you're not really sure what's going on, and you're confused. You know, she was pretending like she was being very professional about things when she was actually being incredibly unprofessional and dishonest. And so she walks into my office. I was having a meeting with one of my direct reports. Just knocks on the door, hidden. I don't think she'd ever been in my office before. I'd been there about 1.5 years, and she was just down the hall. Walks in my office, sits down, throws the other person out, sits down, hands me a letter that is unsigned. It's just a paragraph, and it says, I want you out of here in 2 weeks. 2 weeks notice, which is kind of unheard of for that position. And it said, but because she said, you're very good with faculty, but you're a bad colleague. Well, first off, if you're a provost and you're good with faculty, you're like 85% of the way there. That's very rare, right? That provost be very good with faculty, right? So that's like you're worth your weight in gold. But okay, that aside, but she was saying as a bad colleague, which was belied by the fact that when it was announced I was leaving, my fellow vice presidents, except for her favorite, like had an outpouring of concern. And, when I said, could you write a letter of recommendation? Absolutely. Later on, I asked a couple of them for testimonials. Absolutely. Years later, I was a bad colleague.
Right. And also, like you said, she hadn't been in office in over a year.
Yeah, so I don't think she'd ever.
How could it even be?
Yeah. But so she made this claim and said, I want you out of here on Valentine's Day. And she said, you can go be a faculty member because you're good with faculty. In the fall. So you take off this semester, she can pay me out for the rest of the semester. And that's how they buy you off, by the way. That's what they do. And then she said, and it was a deep pay cut, and it was a non-tenure track position. I'm thinking, you're doing this to me as vice president. How am I going to be treated as a non-tenure track faculty?
Right.
Yeah, I don't think so, lady. That I made that decision right on the spot. But this was totally out of the blue. I mean, I had no idea this was coming. I mean, she'd been doing horrible things to me. Like I said, to the point where other people had noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was horribly depressed, in really bad shape, but I wasn't expecting to have her walk around. And I said to her, what's the precipitating cause here? Like, why today? Because literally the week before, I had announced that through merely tweaking the teaching schedule, having my dean just play with the teaching schedule, we had saved over $130,000 at a school where that's a massive chunk of the budget,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we were throwing away money because of bad scheduling for forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just announced we saved $130,000 just by playing with things. And finally, I said, I mean, just last week I said this thing. She's like, well, I knew you had to go because you said you didn't say things that I know you said. And this went back to I'm sorry, this gets into so this is why I don't talk about this. I had my first evaluation with her, which was on like July 1st or something. She said it started with someone told her that they heard that one of my direct reports said that I said this thing. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't. So there's that, so you heard a rumor. Okay. Yeah,
Right.
And I actually literally said the opposite. In fact, I said the opposite to these two people, and you can go ask them. I said the literal opposite of that. And that's what that was why that was basically it. So
Right.
this is
Looking for something. Yeah.
right. It was nonsense. So I departed there. My wife got a job up here, which is why we ended up upstate New York. And I was applying for jobs, and I thought, and then COVID hit, right after that. So thank you to that president for helping me dodge that bullet, and not having to be in higher ed during that fiasco.
Right.
And I can go on and on why higher ed handled that so badly, but so we moved up here, and I at first was applying for jobs and getting interviews, but these schools were just haywire because of COVID. They interview you, and then you never hear anything. You couldn't get an answer to the phone. We're too busy. Like you're too busy to answer the phone and tell them what's going on. That kind of thing. And then I realized these people are crazy. I don't want anything to do with higher ed. And one day I hadn't actually had a local interview that was coming up, and I called them up. I said, I'm not coming. I don't want to be interviewed. I'm done. And that was it. And I thought, well, what do I like doing? What am I good at? What I really like, because I actually really love being an administrator. I really love it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what do I really love about it? I said, one of the things I loved most was working with young managers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not necessarily even people who reported to me, but working with them and helping them become really great leaders and passing that on. I said, that's what I want to do.
Working with people who strive for more and want to grow,
And helping them strive for more.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I switched up. But like I said, I don't tell, and there's a lot more to that story.
Well, yeah, I mean, the point is, one, it's always great to tell a good story to keep everybody's interest, of
Is that a good
course, right?
story? I don't know if that's a good story.
Well, I think there are ways to improve the story, considering it's your first time telling it.
Yeah.
When we tell, this is your public speaking lesson, everyone.
Yeah.
When the more we tell a story, the better we get at telling it.
That is very true.
Right. So the better we get at telling it, because then we learn what parts are parts that we don't need, that aren't necessary.
Right.
We also learn how to frame it so that people can paint the picture of, okay, where is it? What do they look like? Descriptions of things.
Of course.
But at the end of it, why it still is a good story, even though it's your first time telling it, and I think I encourage you to tell it more as you teach about leadership, is what do we get from this story? And you said this earlier. It's you teach on not so much how to become a great leader, but you teach on what not to do. And I think what this story really tells us is, one, it gives us a little insight into you and your moral compass, which is wonderful, in that as somebody that we're going to follow as our coach or as our keynote, is that we were following somebody who has great integrity and stands by his values. That's wonderful that we get from that story. The other thing we get from that story is this leader, or excuse me, this manager who was touted or thought of as a leader, but not.
Yeah.
And why not? And I think you give several examples of how they were not a leader. And I think one of them is presence.
Oh, nice insight there. Yeah.
Presence is huge, right? Like as a leader, we always hear the term is I never ask my people to do things I won't do. Okay, that's fair. But are you also there with them? And how are you there with them? Right? So there are plenty of things that leaders ask people to do that they don't do or that they're never going to do.
Of course.
But will you be there with them?
Yeah.
And to your point, she wasn't there to hire you. She was virtually there with you. She had never stepped foot in your office. So there's so many different areas, and those are just some of the examples that you said in that story that shows that she was never present.
That's a great insight there, Michael, actually, because that was a big problem with her as the president. She wasn't on campus. I don't know where she was. She was on all these boards. I mean, she was supposed to be a great fundraiser. I don't know if she ever raised $1 while I was there, but she was on all these boards and was constantly dividing about. But she was not on campus. And there were major events where I was like the highest ranking person, but I wasn't assigned to be in charge. And so I kind of had to go and play this weird role of, these are things like, the faculty and staff Christmas party. Where's the president? We had a major televised announcement about a change in our tuition. And the head of admissions at that time, who was actually a consultant we hired, was announcing this. He announced it. Where's the president? The president was in her office having a meeting. It was literally, all she had to do was walk 5 minutes, say a couple words, and go back to her office. No matter how important the meeting is.
And we know what that meeting was.
And it was.
It was that crisis phone call that you mentioned earlier.
No, it wasn't.
No, I mean in the sense of
I know exactly what the meeting was. It was not.
It wasn't important at all.
No.
Yeah. It was the false.
Yeah. But what I did was I knew that he was going to be alone up there. So I told my deans, I want you to make time and we're going to be there standing off to the side as a show of solidarity. That's presence.
Yes.
Right. So my deans were there, and we stood there and we cheered and we, did the whole thing so that people could see this wasn't this poor guy up here who wasn't even a permanent employee of the college making this announcement to the press.
Right. Which is the other thing about leadership. So you have that presence. You have the other thing of essentially throwing people to the wolves, of stepping over people with intention.
Right.
And that's the other thing I pick up from your story here that you shared, is that she was very willing to, of course, not take blame for anything, but blame others.
Yeah.
And when we think about a manager versus a leader, not that managers necessarily do that, because people that are viewed as leaders do that too. But a leader would never do that. A leader takes ownership for their entire organization and will be the shield to that organization and take those bullets.
Right.
So I think that in your story there, it also shows another lack of leadership in that she was willing to put people down in order to protect herself.
Right.
She was willing to put somebody at a podium when she should have really been at the podium.
Right.
Maybe they could have set it up, but she would be there to support the comments or the Q&A.
Oh, this was something where any institution, the president would say something.
So that was another piece that I pick up from this story that you say here. The other one that also I'm hearing a lot and kind of sticks with what I just said there is the inner politics of it all.
Yeah.
Is that in organizations, a manager lets the inner politics run loose. A manager just allows people to have what they'll call friendly competition, where there's no such thing, right? They'll call it friendly competition. Oh, that's good. But really all it is that people are just eating away at each other. People are having conflict with each other. And you as the manager are not addressing it. You're not addressing it for multiple reasons. Maybe you don't want to be there. You don't want to do the job. It's too hard. It's challenging. It's all these different reasons. But that's what makes you a manager, is that you're not addressing the inner politics. And what happens with the inner politics is that they just eat away at the core values of the organization and the organization, which is what you witnessed with her special pet vice president. And why people probably bought into you, which caused inner politic problems for her.
I was, yeah, it was very,
Right?
she found it, she resented.
So what we learn from this story is how important it is to be in tune with everyone and understand, why do you like that person? Why do you dislike that person? I'm being very blunt in that because that's not necessarily the question to ask, but it's really just understanding what's driving this person, what's driving that person. How do we get the two to collaborate? How do we help the two to understand, or the three, or the different organizations, or the different schools in your situation? And that I didn't hear come through in your story. In your story, especially when you speak about gaslighting, it sounds as though she intentionally put people at odds with each other, which causes the inner politics conflict.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot more to it than that.
Right.
I mean, I glossed over a lot of that.
But this is the learnings that we get from stories like this.
Oh, yes.
Right? This is the findings.
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my first time dealing with gaslighting and bullying bosses either. And it's funny, after that, when I did get on the job market, I would get interviews. And I blew a couple of the interviews almost on purpose. Because what I did was I'd say, tell me about the president. And they would tell me, and I'd say, yeah, but is the president micromanaged? Is the president, oh, no. And then they would tell me something like, that's micromanaging. I said, that's micromanaging. What do you mean the president doesn't micromanage? I knew right then and there I'm not getting a job. I'm also thinking, I don't want the job.
I don't want the job, yeah.
I don't want to work with this organization.
Right.
So fine, don't hire me.
Is it conflating for this term? Let me see if I'm using this right. I've been wanting to use conflating because I've heard it so much, right? Where they're conflating micromanaging to presence, right? Where they're saying, I'm here, and so that's why I'm watching your every step, because I'm being present.
Yeah, I mean, they might be. I think a lot of times with micromanagement, most micromanagers are perfectionists in my experience, right? Perfection, just for the audience, so everyone knows, that's impossible.
Right.
Okay, it doesn't mean you don't try to improve. Improvement's good. Better's good.
Improvement's possible.
Perfect, not possible.
Right.
And when you aim for it, you always will fail.
Right.
And most perfectionists first beat themselves up and then point fingers, right? That's their operation. The other thing is they're control freaks, right? And so control freaks don't let anything go. When I was at the school outside of Baltimore as a dean, another dean was a control freak like I've never seen. And my comment about her was, if you stick a thumb in every pie, all you do is ruin a lot of pies, right? I mean, that's what she did. She just like had to be in everything, you know, and it was like unbelievable. Yeah. This is not a healthy thing.
Right.
And then you get your micromanagement. You get your people who just, they can't delegate. If they do delegate, they watch over your shoulder, and on and on and on.
And so little gets done when that happens, right? Because if delegating, what's wonderful about delegating is that you get so much more done. When you just trust someone, you say, hey, look, you have the skill set to do this. This is what we need to accomplish together. Go off and do it. Come back to me in a month from now. Let me know how it goes. That manager, that leader can now work with somebody else.
I'll let you in a little secret. I'm not a genius.
Right.
Okay. And so I got these people I work with who are like really good professionals and all. They have ideas.
Yes.
And they're really smart.
Right.
And they see things I don't see. And, delegation is key. One of my favorite times was, you can tell I'm a lousy employee. I mean, I am a horrible employee.
Most entrepreneurs are.
Well, I was never an entrepreneur until recently.
Well, you are.
But
it's in our DNA.
This is my message to the world: never hire me.
Yeah.
So when I was a dean, my boss, one time he liked to yell, and one of my sayings is, "There's a special place in hell for bosses who yell." And he yelled at me. That actually was the last time he yelled at me, because that's the time I yelled back, and I can yell really loud.
And then it was over.
And that was it. But he actually said to me, I delegated something to a young faculty member, and he wanted it done a certain way. But I want you to do it the way it's best for your school. But he wanted it done a certain way. But he didn't tell me what the certain way was. And when he came back and it wasn't his way, I pushed back. It's like, this is ludicrous, right? Yeah. This is your child, right? Like, what is your problem? But he said to me, he started yelling at me, and he said, I asked you to do it your way, but you turned it over to this faculty member. And I said, what are you saying? He goes, you didn't keep an eye on him. You didn't watch him real closely. And I said, you're angry because I delegated? and he was taken back at that, and I just ripped into him.
Yeah.
But that was, I mean, what an unbelievable thing. The crazy thing was, this young faculty member did a stellar job.
Right.
But it just wasn't what the boss
and wanted, right?
The
and that's where you go with the bosses.
Right.
And then the other piece that I want to bring up about this story that you mentioned about this Kentucky school is you used the word, she lowballed me on the salary.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very important because what I wanted to bring up in that is what lowballing is.
Yeah.
Right. What is lowballing?
Well, in this case, she basically, she tried to quote me a salary that was absurdly low, and then said, well, the cost of living here is so low, we're a poor school, and blah, 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 blah. When I knew very well she was making way more than that.
And that's what lowballing is.
Right.
It's knowing that you have this power over someone and going below it.
But then she was able to meet. She was able to raise it. It still was ridiculously low, but she was able to.
Of course she was, right? Because that's what lowballing is. That's what the holding of the power is. Yeah. The holding of the power is saying this job, we have $80,000 or $100,000 to hire somebody at this level, but we're going to only offer them 40.
Oh yeah, the school is outside of Baltimore. When I was a dean, we had a horrible HR VP, another bully, and she used to say, you cannot offer the full salary. You have to lowball. And I argued with her and got it down to like so I always had a lowball $1,000, just so because I wasn't gonna lie, right?
Right.
But what I would do is, because she said to me, "Did you offer the lower salary?" And I would say, I could say yes, honestly. But then I would like sort of drop in and say, "Well, this is the salary we're offering, but I want you to think about it. Think about that's enough for you, or if you need, just think about that because you might, we don't want to not offer you, what you need. Usually they would come back and say, could you do, a little better? And I said, well, absolutely.
And well, why I bring up this situation is because it's the holding of power.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you go back to your teaching of what not to do, a manager is going to try to hold power because that's all they have. Right. It's like the parent saying, you're not going to get dinner if you don't eat, you're not going to get dessert if you don't eat the broccoli. Right. And it's just like, you're just holding power. Yeah. So eventually, so what do you do when the kid finally is like a teenager and they can go and have dessert whenever they want? Yeah. Right. How do you hold the power over them? It's gone. Yeah. Right. So power is false. It's just based in that.
As is control.
Right. It's all false. Right. But a real leader, which is what you teach on, right? They're not going to lowball. It's exactly what you just said. It's where can we meet here? Imagine if you go to the table with this person and you say, hey, look, when we hire for this position, we usually hire anywhere between $80,000 and $100,000. I'd love to offer you the higher of the spectrum. What qualifies you to get the higher of the spectrum?
That's a reasonable approach,
right?
You're being honest.
The person might say, hey, you know what? I don't want the pressure of 100,000. Maybe why don't we go to 90? Why don't we go to 85 because I feel more comfortable and I can work my way to that. Fair enough. Actually, what's very funny about me bringing up that example is this is just accidental because it just popped in my mind. The situation I was telling you about that insurance company that I worked for, and I got my 6-figure salary that I always wanted. When I was speaking with the recruiter, it's so funny that this just popped in my mind as I was giving you that example. It probably makes sense because it's exactly what happened. The recruiter, she was really good. She was savvy. She was really good. And I had said to her, I wanted, I'll say the salary exactly. I was like, I know what other people are earning there because I had been referred in, and I want $150,000. I want $150,000. I said to the recruiter. She said, that's great, Michael. She goes, I love your ambition. She goes, I want you to realize what $150,000 comes with as a base salary there. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, what does it come with? And she goes, comes with all these different things of requirements, mm-hmm. right? She said, do you feel confident that you could meet these requirements? And I was like, no. I go, but I really want the 150. She goes, I understand that. She goes, and they could pay it obviously because you know that, right? Because I told her the person's name and what they earned, right? Because that's the person that referred me. And she said, so do you feel? And I said, no. She goes, so you would be doing yourself a disservice. You're gonna have a target on your back, and eventually you're gonna get found out, right? And you're gonna get fired. You're never gonna even earn that 150. And I really appreciated her saying that to me because from there I said, okay, I'm much more, I still want to hit my 6-figure goal. 110 is what I'm comfortable with based off of what you guys hire at and what I can do and where I won't have a target on my back. And she said, cool. And you know what she actually did for me? I said 110. I agreed to that. They hired me at 125.
Nice. Yeah.
So now, while the organization ran its way, this woman, she didn't have power. I mean, she had power, right? She had power in terms of salary ranges, but she used it in a way of a leader.
Right.
She helped me understand, like you said, a teacher.
Right.
She helped me understand what it came with, what responsibility that salary I wanted came with, and what salary I probably felt more comfortable came with. And yet, she still was able to raise it like you did, right? Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. That's great. But it seems like it's so rare.
It's very rare.
It's like when I did have the power, when I was a vice president and I could dictate these things, and nobody in HR could tell me otherwise, then I would always just offer the straight salary. Mm. But I also delegated hiring to the deans. Mm. And the reason I did that was because I thought it was important, because apparently my predecessors did the hiring, right? I always delegated to the deans because I wanted them to have ownership over the faculty.
Yeah.
Right. Not ownership.
No. Yeah. But
ownership in the good sense.
Yeah. I think when you say ownership in that sense, you're talking about being a part of ownership in that of what you create, fighting for what you create.
Right. And I also wanted them to have that experience of hiring. And I used to say to them, one of the deans had been there a long time. This is a different school. Had been there a long time, and he had never actually made the offer to hire someone, and he was very nervous about it. And I said, Ben, I'm going to tell you something. Here's how you do it. I said, you can do this, you can do. I gave him different strategies. Whatever you're comfortable with, you do it your way. There's no wrong way. I mean, there's wrong ways, but I mean, out of this selection, there's no wrong way. I said, but when you do this, you are going to feel so good. And he called me up a little while later, and I was like, so you hired a person? Yeah, I hired him. So how'd it feel? It felt great. And I said, that's why I wanted you to do it.
It's so true too, with when you talk about ownership, because I've been in so many situations in jobs where, and I've had a roller coaster of jobs, a career, a roller coaster career, and I always.
Most people.
And the reason why is because you're not living for a while. I love that you brought up Simon Sinek, right? And I'll kind of just keep this short, but only just for context for everyone, is that, and I speak about it, and you heard me talk about it in my talk of my roller coaster career, is, I went high and low in sales, high and low, and it was all because I wasn't living in my purpose. I wasn't living in my passion. Now that I do, I mean, it's like, the world's my oyster, right? It's like amazing. It's like I meet people like you, and you introduce me to other people, and we're getting on stages, and we're coaching, and we're training, and we're keynoting, and now we're living in our purpose. But I go back to this hiring, firing life that I was living, and I want to just talk about the ownership of hiring somebody. In that, I remember several leaders that I had, and I'm back to what exactly you said. I had some bosses, some managers, and I had some leaders, and a key differentiator between the two, outside of everything else that we've talked about, but right now in the hiring portion of what we're talking about, is the managers would outright just fire me, right? They would just, it wasn't much to it. It was just, hey, you didn't meet the numbers, you didn't meet the metric, and it was like, boom, it's like almost like the shock that you just had in your face of like, you're fired. And it's like, yeah, I kind of saw this coming, but I didn't see this coming from you, right? Whereas my leaders would always kind of bring me under their wing. And give me some foreshadowing of, hey, Michael, I remember one taking me out to an Applebee's. Actually, we had lunch at Applebee's that day, and she said, "What are you trying to do here?" And I was like, "I don't know." It was one of my first sales jobs, actually. And she goes, "Well, what do you want out of this job?" And I said, "I just want to make the most money I can." She goes, "Okay, well, how can I help you do that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting question." And then as I look back, I'm like, "Okay,
that is what a manager's supposed to do."
Right, and she did. She helped me do that. What she told me later on, after I hit my goal for that quarter, was she was like, "Michael, you were about to get fired, but I hired you." And that meant the world to her.
Wow.
I wasn't going to let that happen to you. You know what I mean? Like, I just got emotional. I just got some emotion run through me from that moment, because that team that I had, that was a yellow book. That team of managers that I had, there were leaders. There was Danielle, who was my direct, and then there was Antonella, who was her manager, but also was part of the hiring process. These two women hired me and groomed me and mentored me, and not just me, but everybody in that office. They took responsibility for the people they hired, and they would take us out to lunch one-to-ones and have those conversations when they had to have them. But nobody in that office was ever fired, which I didn't get fired from that office, but nobody was in that office was ever fired without having some sort of lunch meeting, some sort of conversation, some sort of how can we get you over the hump, to the point where I was at sales organizations where the best players got the leads. And in this one, it was like the ones that were struggling got the call in the office and they'd walk out with a lead.
Yeah. And let me guess, it was no less productive and perhaps more productive and more profitable than other organizations you were in.
We hit, so this was Yellow Book, so we were selling Yellow Page advertising. We were one of the offices that hit our book goals consecutively.
This is what gets me.
And there was turnover.
What you described it, you can call it leadership. You can call it leadership. It's leadership, absolutely. But the first principle of leadership is highlighted by that approach, right? Taking people out. By the way, lunches are great. I used to take people lunch all the time, but just to get to know them. But taking people out and treating them. This is it. Everybody, write this down. Get out your pen. We need this. Treating them with human decency. That's it. That is the core principle of leadership. If you come in with that value and apply that, then you will succeed as a leader. Now, you might not hit the metrics that some boss over you likes. That's a whole nother question. But as a leader for yourself, when you go to bed at night, you may be worrying about your job, but you won't be worrying about your soul, right? And that's what it comes down to.
And to that point, we fought for them, right? Like when you asked me about hitting our goals, we hit our goals not because they drove us to hit our goals in that group. It was a very small period of time, because then we did an acquisition, and then we got into a bigger office, and things kind of did change. Management changed and things changed. But while we were in that, it was in Newburgh, by the way. Okay. Our office was in Newburgh. It was a small group. It was about 20 of us.
My adopted town.
Yeah, it was about 20 of us. And we hit our goal not because they drove us to it, but because we all had the inner desire to do it. And it was because of what I'm talking about with our Monday morning meetings, where if it was your birthday that week, we almost had a birthday cake at almost every Monday morning meeting, at least once a month, because Antonella always celebrated everybody's birthday with a birthday cake. Everybody's birthday got celebrated. And it wouldn't be just because it was your birthday that day. It would be like maybe the months, the January people would get their birthday cake. But it was that kind of camaraderie that she created and instilled in all of us, to where when we were just teetering on hitting the book goal, we were all out prospecting. We were all out like, we got to hit this book goal. She also gave us some great incentives on the other side. Incentives that she didn't have to do, that other offices didn't do. Taking us to Mohegan Sun and giving us money to go play the slot machine. Wow. We all got $100. I mean, taking us to dinners, like doing things that were above and beyond what other managers did. This was leadership.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It's funny you bring up the birthday thing, because so when I was a dean, there were, I think, 6 of us, right? And we had the provost who we reported to. And we would have a meeting every week, come hell or high water, pretty much. 2 hours. I mean, these were horrible. They were so miserable. And everybody was miserable and cranky. It was just, ugh. And I always did this thing where I would sit in a different seat every time, which was very disruptive. Good negotiating technique too. I can tell you a story about that. But just move your seat, and and people didn't know where to sit. I would sit on this side of the table. Where do I sit? We'll sit on the other side of the table, dummy. You always have to sit in the same seat. And I even did that when I was the boss. I never sat at the head. I would just move around. And so we would have, it was somebody's birthday, there was always some cake. He'd make his assistant bring a cake, or somebody would bake cake. And it was just always the most miserable experience. It was so demoralizing, because everybody'd have their cake, and it just wouldn't even be, everybody was tense and sick.
It wasn't a celebration.
It wasn't a celebration. It was just so fake, So this is the lesson. The cake is fake, right? The cake isn't the means to the end, right? The cake is what you do when you really mean it. It's sincere. Like, I'm not like a cake guy, right? I would never have a celebration for my people because I'm not a birthday guy. I could care less about birthdays, right? Nobody knows when my birthday is. It just happens, right? So I never, I wouldn't ever do that because that's not my thing. It wouldn't be sincere.
It's so important what you're saying, yeah. Sincere.
But I would, but I showed them many other ways. I showed how, like I used to, when I was the dean, I used to have these. We had the only time we could have a meeting with my department chairs was at lunchtime. So I provided lunch, out of my budget,
right?
And we did that every time. And if there wasn't a reason to meet, wait for it, we didn't meet, or if the meeting ended, we got our business done, we just hang out,
right?
This is your time, relax, eat your lunch, enjoy. It was like, it wasn't about, we have to have a 2-hour meeting every week.
Right.
And today is birthday day. Everyone commence eating the cake. That's what it felt like.
But you're 100% right. And I love that you bring that up and use that as an example because it has to do with authenticity. And that word is so used. And I like that you use the word sincerity because that is the true sign of a leader, right? Is that you're authentic, you're sincere. Is that for Antonella, she is a birthday girl, right? It was important to her. And that sincerity comes through. How does it come through? It comes through with what I was saying before about cold calling. How does it come through? It comes through in, we're not just doing a cake to do a cake.
Right.
We're celebrating, we're singing happy birthday. There's an upbeat to it. There's cake, there's plates, there's a conversation around it. There's a camaraderie that happens. There's conversations after. And with what you're talking about, we could see it, right? It's happy birthday, everyone. Here's your slice of cake. And now let's get to the numbers. And that shows right there that there's a lack of sincerity. The other thing that you brought up that I thought was also very important for people to hear is that when we talk about managers or leaders going the extra mile and having these incentives of, like I said, she took us to Mohegan Sun or to dinner. And you said it, I took it out of my budget and got lunch for them. I think what's important for everyone to hear is that when a leader buys lunch or takes you somewhere, they have a budget that they could use in so many different places. And the question between a manager and a leader is, how am I using this budget? Am I using it because, I want to see improvements in the office of like, I want better lighting for myself because I just think it'll be better, nicer? Or am I using it to do better lighting because it's going to help my employees? Well, it's not the best example because what I want to say about the budget is that they can use it in ways that don't benefit the employees. They can use it to buy more supplies on something, more copier paper or whatever it is, or they could use it to invest in the employees. And with what you said is that you used it to invest in them in a luncheon, making them feel appreciated, maybe an educational seminar.
I would take faculty and administrators to conferences, and they'd be like, the faculty had like a certain amount they were able to spend. They got like a little, it was at one school, it was literally a budget. They actually got a little budget amount. Other schools was like an award or something, and they could go to a conference. And this is very important when you're an academic, right? You need to go out and interact with your colleagues. And I would take them to conferences with me, right? Or I'd have a dean or something, and they'd be like, well, my budget, I don't have any more money in my budget. I'm like, don't worry about it. I got it. Come on. We're going to go. And, and I'd have my assistant, my poor put upon assistants, set it up for them, so they weren't like sitting there playing games with it, trying to book flights and all this. What a waste of time.
Right.
This person, she's great at this. Let her do it. She's great at this.
Yeah.
But, so it was like I would use my budget all the time.
Right.
To help people. What else is the money for?
To invest in them.
What else is the money for? Your entire being. It's not about the money. Your entire being, when you're a manager of any kind, is to invest in your people. Your job, your sole job, is to make them better at doing theirs.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And that's back to your thing of the differentiation of manager versus leader. A manager is looking at their budget, saying, where can we cut the budget? Where can we use it so that it's used in whatever the facilities or the operations or whatever? A leader is looking at it going, how can we reinvest in our people?
Right.
And if the better lighting is reinvestment in our people, then great.
Of course.
But how do we invest in our people? And I think that's another thing that we get out of, when we go back to the whole lowballing of salaries and all the rest is it's a lack of investment in people. And that is really, really important to understand as a leader is that, like you said, we're there to invest in our people.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story about the college I was in Kentucky, and that other vice president who had an academic piece, but she, for some reason, she had IT under her. I never understood that because she knew nothing about that. we had a big nursing program at that school. And nursing is it's licensed, it's this and that. They have to jump through all these hoops. There's a lot to it. It's a lot to it. And they had this exam they have to take, a very high stake exam called an NCLEX. And this could make or break your program. Like if your pass rate drops too low, they can pull your accreditation. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
Done, right? So this is a very, very, very big deal. Well, the NCLEX was done online, right? So it was you had to have a computer. Well, this building that the nursing school was in had atrocious Wi-Fi. So the students would try to take the exam and it would be shutting down. It was problem. And so I said, well, why don't I have an idea? I know I'm going out here on a limb. Why don't we get better Wi-Fi in that building, right? Well, that's going to cost money. Okay, losing the nursing program would be a bigger loss of money, don't you think? This is how much could it cost? It's going to cost $8,000. I was told. It's not going to cost $8,000. There was already Wi-Fi. It was not going to cost $8,000. So, I don't even remember how I did this, but I pulled in the head of IT and had a meeting with him with the nursing team, and I said, and at first he was kind of like, well, we're going to have to do this, we're going to do that. And finally, he was a good guy. He was a really good guy. He just finally said, it's going to cost $3,000. And I said, I got that in my budget. And the nursing team says, I got that in my budget. And then he says, I got it in mine. The whole time they're telling me, I'm sitting there in a meeting with the other vice presidents, and somebody's like, well, why don't we have the nursing students go from this building to this building where there's better Wi-Fi during the middle of the day so they can take the exam doing this? I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? This is like, we're going to move the students around. You're not investing in the students. Oh my God. What are your values here?
Right.
What are your values?
Right.
And lying about how much it was going to cost was another thing.
Right.
I mean, I forget what the amounts were, but but it was like,
well,
I'll never forget him just saying, I've got that.
Yeah.
I have my budget. I said, wait, you have a budget for improving Wi-Fi on campus? He goes, yeah, that's a budget line. His boss would lie.
Of course.
In front of everybody else, lie.
Oh my goodness.
He blatantly lied.
Yeah.
Or was grossly mistaken and should not have talked. Either one, right?
Both were probably true.
It doesn't matter.
Both were probably true.
What she said was untrue.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I love doing this show with people like you, where we meet at a networking event, and there's something about chemistry there. We didn't talk much, but I sat through your presentation, and I remember when you were done, I was just like, I got to talk to that guy. It was just something about you, and you and I talked for a little bit afterwards. I
remember I accidentally hijacked your computer.
Yes. But I think we also ended up missing like the closing remarks because you and I were stayed back with one person, but there was a good chemistry between us. And I'm very fortunate now with this show, and I really, really am appreciative, and I hope everybody who's listening is appreciative of this, in that I no longer have to go out looking for guests. It's really, really wonderful. When I started the show, I had to work really hard. I hate to say it, spamming as many people I knew on LinkedIn to come on my show.
Yeah.
And I'm at a point now where I get offered a lot of people. I have a couple of PR agencies where, I'm very grateful for you PR agencies who are out there listening right now for sending me your people. I'm very grateful for that. So what's really nice about this is it removes the pressure from me to have to find people and search for people. So what I'm getting at is what's nice is when I meet someone where I'm like, I feel like you'd be a great guest for my show. And they follow through, because some people don't follow through, that I say that to, and that's okay. They still would be a great guest if they do follow through, and they follow through. This is the kind of conversations that I love to have, where it's not just about your product. It's not just about your services. It's these stories that we got to hear today. It's this relationship that you and I have built in these 2 hours together, and we'll continue to build and in our previous conversations. This is what I just love about the show. And I'm just so appreciative that two things happened. One, you took me up on my offer, and you went to my website, and you filled out the intake form, and you were like,
It took like 10 hours.
Because you were very thoughtful in it, and I see that, and that's why we've been able to have such great stories and conversations.
It took me a while to find my birth certificate, but I did find it.
But so you took me up on that offer, and then two, you followed up with it because, unfortunately, because of some sort of glitch in my website and the intake form, I didn't know that you filled it out.
Yeah.
And so you followed up with it, and I want to give a shout out to the people at Master Networks. It's not a plug for them, but it's a plug for them because Rick,
Rick Gabrielli.
Yeah, Rick Gabrielli and I had a meeting, and he's just great at following up with people. He's just really great.
Yeah.
And he followed up with me. He said, "Hey, Michael, let's get together. What's new with you?" And so we got together. We got on a Zoom, and I was telling him what's new with me. Yeah. And he said, "Oh, you should. Have you ever gone back to the guys that Jim? I forget his last name.
Jim Sandler.
Jim Sandler. Have you ever gone back in touch with him?" I said, "No." He goes, "Get back in touch with him." And so I sent that email that ended up was in my draft since we had done the conference. And you responded and said, "Hey, I don't know if you know, but I filled out that intake form." I went, "No," and I'm so happy that you followed up with that because it's really, really wonderful, and I hope everybody listening can get the vibe here when I have somebody in studio with me that we are just riffing.
Yeah,
this was just fun, and I know that you and I can stay here for another 2 hours and 3 hours and just talk.
We didn't even talk about tiny habits.
Oh my goodness! So as we start wrapping this up, as we start wrapping this
Stay
up,
tuned.
Well, as we start wrapping it up, why don't we talk a little bit about tiny habits, because this is another piece that is super important about what you do, and I think everybody can get so much information from this. So let's stay here for couple more minutes here on tiny habits, because you and I both agree that habits are what build leaders.
Yeah.
And
behaviors.
Not just the big habits that I talked about before, but the tiny habits. So that's your segue right there.
Okay. So Tiny Habits, for those of you who don't know, is a program that was started by Dr. BJ Fogg, who is a Stanford researcher. He runs the Stanford Behavior Change Lab, I believe it's called. And he wrote a book called Tiny Habits. I suggest you buy it. Don't confuse it with Atomic Habits, which draws a lot from his research, but this is his research.
I read Atomic Habits.
Okay.
That's a good one.
So Tiny Habits is basically the premise is that you have we have what they call the Fogg behavior model. One of BJ's insights is that, and through his research, is that all behavior breaks down to three elements: motivation, ability, and some prompt. Something gets you to do it. MAP, right? Motivation is whether you want to do it or not. Ability is whether you can do it or not, and prompt is something gets you to do it. We often put all our money on the motivation, right? Mm-hmm. And I always use the example, this past month in January, the gyms were full. This coming month in February, the gyms will be empty. Why? Because something happened, people's motivation waned. Motivation is a roller coaster. It's up and down, it's in and out. You can't rely on it. And yet we're always like, you should just power through, right? That's nonsense. It doesn't work that way. So one of BJ's great insights was, if you increase people's ability to do something, then the motivation ceases to matter, right? And you want to start with things that people want to do. That's important. Help people do what they want to do, not something they don't want to do. If you don't want to lift weights, it doesn't matter what you do, they're not going to do it, right? But if somebody wants to get more exercise, so for instance, you want to have a regime where you do more push-ups, right? So what you need to do is, instead of doing 20 push-ups at first, do 1 or 2, right? And then build the habit. How do you build the habit? First off, you need something to attach it to. We call that an anchor, something you already do, a motivation, right? Not motivation. Flip that, strike that word. It is, some sort of activity you already do, a routine, another habit, like say brushing your teeth, right? Every time I brush my teeth, I'm going to do 2 push-ups. Okay, great. How do you make that a habit? A lot of times you hear it's about repetition, doing it over and over. 20 days, a new habit, 22 days, 90 days, 6 months, 10 years, whatever. The reason there's so many different days, because none of that's true. There's no research to back any of that up. Mm-hmm. You can form a habit in an instant. If you want, I'll give you an example of one that you form in an instant. But, you can form a habit in instant. What locks in a habit? It's not time. Here's another part of his research. It is emotion. Emotion. Every habit you have has some emotion that has locked it in, good, bad, or indifferent. Well, we try to be positive with tiny habits. So the emotion we use is celebration. And there's an emotion, the emotion that where you feel success. And BJ calls that shine. And you try to build shine. So everybody has different ways they celebrate, or they don't celebrate and they need to learn to. We can help with that. But you celebrate the moment. So you brush your teeth, you do your 2 push-ups, and then you celebrate it. And you do that, and it becomes a habit. And like suddenly you want to do the push-ups because the celebration feels so good, right? The next time you brush your teeth, you're like, oh, I got to do this, right? And it just becomes what you do. Okay, so you're doing 2 push-ups, big deal. The best thing is the habits are like little seeds. You do 2 push-ups, then one day you're like, let me try 5. Next thing you know, you're doing 5. I have a similar habit I started. I do over 120 push-ups every day. Easy, right? Every day. I don't do them all at once. I do them in blocks, but I do, based on a tiny habit.
I'm with you on that. It's just to say the same thing with what you just said. I have a skiing injury, my right shoulder. I have no right shoulder. It's just a bone here, no muscle here. And for many years, I always said I can't do push-ups. For many years, if I did 10 push-ups, I'd get like a neck cramp and my shoulder would just like hurt and I'd get like bad cramps. I would go to the gym and work out and do different exercises, but I would do exercises that wouldn't put pressure on my right shoulder that I'm touching right now. Because I said I can't do push-ups because I would get these aches. And I don't know if it was atomic habits that led me to do exactly what you're talking about, but that's exactly how I started. Was I was doing something like 5 or 10 push-ups for the day. And then eventually it got to 30, and then eventually it got to 50, and now I do 100 push-ups a day also. Same thing happened with the pull-up bar for me, where I couldn't do pull-ups because of my shoulder, and I would always say that. And I was like, let me just do 3. I remember starting with 3. And so I just wanted to just emphasize on how it actually works. I've gone through it.
And you can do it with anything. You can do it with, you want to go for a walk. It doesn't have to be working out. It could be, I want to drink more water. I want to say, I love you to my wife. Right? That's one of my habits now. When I wake up in the morning, my first habit is what's called, this is the classic, we call it the Maui habit. When you first wake up, whatever it is that wakes you, has gotten you, when you wake up, you don't like, oh, I'm awake, right? But what's the first thing you do that tells you you're awake? And, it might be putting your foot on the floor. For some people, they make it all the way to the bathroom and looking in the mirror, whatever it is, right? When you go, oh, I'm awake, at that moment, you say, today is going to be a great day. And then you celebrate it. Here's how I used to get out of bed. I get out of bed, now I get out of bed, I go, today's going to be a great day. What a difference. And boy, does that make a difference. And then the second thing I do is, when I see my wife up and about, I say to her, good morning, I love you. And she always, every day she acts surprised when I say this. It's so cute. She always goes, I love you. but it's great. She's going to hear this and be embarrassed, but it's just such a nice thing to do. You can build habits around anything. Sometimes they're just reminders. Just don't, I used to be very forgetful, and I built all these reminders. Like I do the laundry, and I would forget to grab certain things for the laundry. Well, now I have a habit I built, and it just reminds me to do it. You can build habits around it, but the key is it's not time, it's emotion. You have to celebrate. It has to be in the moment. It can't be, I'm going to have a candy bar at the end of the week to celebrate, going to the gym or something like that. It's got to be in the moment. And the tinier the habit, the more likely you are to be successful. And the idea is to feel successful. That's another one of the maxims of tiny habits is help people feel successful, not be successful, feel successful.
And I think back to the emotion part. So go back to the story I was telling earlier of my sales team, and we were going into referrals. So one of the things that we talk about is asking for referrals. And in sales, the salesy way of asking for referrals is to say to someone sitting across from you, is to say, are you astute with sales at all or no?
No,
you're not. Okay. So the typical thing that
I don't even buy things.
No, there you go. The way that we're trained as salespeople, or that I was trained as a salesperson, is after I close the deal with you, is to say, okay, Jim, here's a piece of paper and a pen. Could you go ahead and write down 3 people that you think could benefit from my service, or that you'd like to introduce me to? And now I put the pressure on you by handing you the paper and a pen to write down those 3 names and phone numbers. It's a very salesy tactic. Does it work? It sure does. It works.
Yeah.
People fall for it, but it's a icky feeling.
But they're falling for it.
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
put it
It's an icky feeling and all that stuff. So nobody really wants to do this. And so I don't want to encourage my sales team to do that. And they don't want to do that. But back to your tiny habits and why I want to just bring up this emotional piece is what I said to my team is, what would you be comfortable doing? And one of them said to me, his name's Jim too, by the way.
There's a lot of us.
Jim said to me, he's like, I've been doing this for 30 years and I never asked for it. I said, we did a whole training on what's holding us back. We do trainings on Mondays on all the different coaching stuff that we enjoy, you and I. And anyway, we did that whole thing. I'm just going to expedite it to where I'm going with this. And he said, I don't mind telling people to just tell their friends and family about what I do. And I said, great. I'm going to the emotion part with this, why I'm bringing this up. I said, Jim, what if we did this? What if after every single call you said to someone, hey, if you're happy with everything I did, could you just tell your friends and family? Would you feel comfortable doing that? He said, yeah, I would. I go, do you do that every call? He goes, no, I don't. I said, start doing that every call, right? And he says, yeah. I said, just sprinkle the seed, just as if you take a sunflower seed and just throwing it out. I'm not asking you to put the dirt on it. I'm not asking you to water it. I'm not asking you to go the extra step, the extra mile.
Yeah.
Just do that. But here's what I want you to do when you do it. I want you to tell yourself that you just asked for a referral. And I want you to put it in our team group chat that you just asked for a referral.
Mm.
And I promise you that if you put that in a group chat, we're all going to give you the smiley face and the emojis. That's what we do. We'll put the fun emojis. Right. And he said, cool. And he did it.
Wow.
And he said, I'm 1 for 1 today. And I said, awesome. And I put a thing in there and it's been going. The point that I'm making here in what you just said is it's the emotion. Mm-hmm. It's no, he did not ask for a referral. In all truth, right? If we were to just really break this down, by him saying, hey, if you like what I did for you, please tell your friends and family, you didn't ask for a referral. Yeah. But emotionally, if he believes in his mind, which we talk about neural pathways and coaching and all this other stuff, if he implants in his mind the emotion of asking for a referral, in his mind, he's setting the tiny habit of after every call, he's asking for a referral. And eventually, he'll feel more comfortable to say, hey, Jim, if you like what I did for you, do you have someone that you could maybe share my contact card with? And then he'll go to, hey, Jim, if you liked what I did for you, could you please share a friend or family's name with me? Right. And he'll do it in an authentic way,
right?
Not in a salesy way.
And what you're doing there is you're helping him feel successful, feel that emotion of success.
That's why I want to bring that up.
That shine is key, right? Feeling that emotion, it's a wonderful feeling,
right?
And it doesn't have to be a big thing, right?
It's an emoji in a group chat.
So what? But
right?
That's
exactly.
What makes you feel good. Yeah. It doesn't have, and this idea of like, oh, at the end of the week, I'll reward myself. At the end of the quarter, you'll get a reward. That doesn't actually work,
right?
It doesn't actually work. People aren't motivated by that in any real way.
Right?
But when you want something fundamental, I mean, I think that's cool. I have a theory. I don't think it's been studied that when leaders praise people with sincerity, that can help people feel shine. Mm-hmm. And actually helps build habits. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. But you can do this around. You can do it around your limiting thoughts. Right? When I have a limiting belief come up, I tell myself, oh, I'm not worthy. I can build a tiny habit, right? Where I say, no, I am absolutely worthy, and then celebrate it. And it helps build a habit of knocking that limiting belief away. I mean, you can do these sorts of things. You can also unravel habits. I used to bite my fingernails horribly. Mm-hmm. I haven't bit my fingernails in years. Mm-hmm. Ever since I found tiny habits, I figured out a way of unraveling that.
Yeah.
I don't bite my fingernails.
Tell us about that, the unraveling, because that is,
I wish you wouldn't ask that. That's a tough one.
well, that's one of the things that I speak about in my training. So in my trainings, I talk about creating productive habits, right? Mm-hmm. I talk about we all have habits, and we have habits that serve us, and we have habits that don't serve us.
Right.
And when I talk about learning new things and being a leader and an entrepreneur and a better communicator, I talk about adding productive habits. And the only way to add a productive habit is to eliminate a habit. And I'm saying that without any back research, but I'm saying that because I want to respect the fact that we're all busy, right? I know that I'm using it in a different context than what you talk about.
Yeah,
right?
it's a little bit different.
I respect the fact that we're all busy, that we have families that we're taking care of, that we have jobs that we're doing, that we have entertainment that we want to have. So I respect that. And what I ask the people that I work with is, out of all of the things that you're doing throughout your day, what's something that's not serving your higher purpose? What's something that's not pushing you closer to your goals? One thing. And if instead of doing that one thing, you can do this productive habit to what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you can just insert that there, then it's not about asking you to create more time. It's asking you to just remove something. But that removal is difficult. And that's why I ask you that question.
Yeah. So it's very difficult. I mean, first off, tiny habits, they start out so small, and sometimes they stay that small. Like now we have it, right? It's a great day, no big deal, right? But they're so small that it's like having to offset it with something doesn't really matter,
right?
Because it doesn't take up any time. But in terms of now, DJ Fowle calls it unraveling habits.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about breaking habits, and he says we don't break habits, we unravel them. They're actually very complex. There's no one way. In fact, I think it's in his book Tiny Habits. I think it's chapter 8 is all about unraveling habits, right? Like there's a whole chapter, and it is very complex. I'm not going to get into here because there's a lot to it. But sometimes the simplest thing to do, if someone has a habit they want to get rid of, they want to unravel somehow. Sometimes it works if you get lucky, and this actually happened with my fingernails, is you replace it with another habit.
Mm-hmm.
So my fingernails, I replaced it with the habit of every time I put my fingers near my mouth, I pull them away.
Yeah.
And I celebrated. And that actually worked. Now, why that worked, I guess, whatever.
But how simple, right?
Right.
Super. It's
that's not always
it's like
common,
silly
right?
simple, right?
Right. But it's not always common
that
it works that easily. Sometimes you have to go more into what's behind it, and there's a whole there's a lot.
Well, it's like you said, what's behind it? That goes back to motivation, ability, and the prompt, right? The prompt is you're putting your fingers in your mouth. What's the motivation to you not wanting to chew your fingers?
Well, I was motivated not to want to, but I'd done it for so long, it was a habit. And it gave me some sort of satisfaction. But when I just replaced it with this other habit.
But why didn't you want to bite them anymore?
Because I was learning to play ukulele and you need fingernails.
So motivation.
Yeah. And also it was ugly and I was sick.
Right.
I tried to quit many
So you had a
times. motivation.
Yeah. So you got to have that. You just said that, right? You have a motivation. Yeah. You had the ability, right? Because you have the ability to move your hand away from your mouth.
Right. But your motivation isn't trustworthy. Right. So you're with fingernail biting, you're doing it unconsciously. Right. You're not always thinking, I'm doing my finger.
I'll challenge you. Yeah. Are you doing it unconsciously because it's a habit though? Because a lot of habits are unconscious.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. And but when I replace it with a conscious habit, right? Putting the fingernails near my mouth, not biting the finger, putting them near my mouth.
Oh, you were intentionally putting them near your mouth?
No.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is instead of saying when I bite my fingernails, I'm going to pull my hand away. I'm already biting.
Right.
It's too late. I'm already enjoying. That's reinforcing the habit. Whatever satisfaction it gave me, it's pretty sick when you think about it. Whatever satisfaction it gave me was it was there, right? They're already in my mouth. I'm chewing away. I'm gnawing away. But now, what a weird thing to talk about. Now, I was just putting my fingers in my mouth. I pull it away, right? So I don't even get to the habit of biting them. And so it eliminated the satisfaction.
Right.
So it had really nothing to do with the motivation.
Interesting.
The motivation is what got me to create the tiny habit.
So for me, let's have you dissect me for a second here. Then one of the habits that I've been working on eliminating, and I've been successful at, but there's like a little one that I still make an excuse for. So I'm successful in the sense that I don't go on social media at all. I don't go on social media. A lot of people. Did you see this post? No, I didn't see the post. Unless you email it to me or text it to me, I typically don't.
I as a former English professor, I have to point out the irony that we're on social media even as we speak. But go ahead.
Even as we speak, we got the YouTube going right now. I'm posting about this on social media. I have a LinkedIn Live on social media. So
stay away from social media, folks.
But 100%. And here's the thing. So, and we're gonna get to the habit, but real quick in terms of this is use social media, but don't consume it. Which is the habit that I'm talking about breaking.
No, I get it.
It's use it, but don't consume it, right? And use it in a way that's productive. So I only put out on social media productive things, right? It's how to improve your public speaking, how to improve your leadership, how to improve these different things. Shine a light on my guests and what they're doing in my Shining Light show. It's putting out the podcast and educational on this. So you can use it, right? And so I don't go on, if in all honesty, I go on to see where my post is, how it posted, what it was.
Sure.
A couple of people that maybe yourself might be on there that I might see, and I'll like your post or whatever, but I'm off in like less than like lightning speed. One of the places that I do tend to go, which is social media, but it's a different type of social media, is YouTube. I enjoy watching videos on cars. I enjoy watching basketball videos. I'm a big basketball fan. I don't get to watch basketball games anymore because I choose not to make the time to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours to 3 hours watching a game that does nothing, that doesn't serve me in any productive way outside of having a good conversation about basketball with somebody about who's the best and who's not the best, right? But watching a couple basketball clips on YouTube is awesome, right? I can see a couple dunks, I can see a couple of 3-point shots. I know who's the guy to talk about right now because that's interesting to me. I see what he's doing, kind of moves. I'm a basketball coach. I watch a lot of basketball coaching videos. So it serves me in these different ways. However, it does keep me up longer than I want, right? So I'll watch it right when I'm putting my daughter to bed. And I go between that window of 8 and 9 o'clock at night, I'll watch it. And then it'll be like 9:15. And I'm like still scrolling through the different basketball clips.
Where are you?
Different
in the house?
YouTube. No, in bed.
On the phone?
On the phone. And I'm like, no, last one, Michael. And then it's like, no, because the YouTube algorithm knows how to hook me for the next one.
Yeah.
And I convince myself that it's a good habit because it's basketball, it's cars, and the other one is self-development. A lot of it is Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and the old clips of all that stuff.
Right.
So I convinced myself this is good for me.
Right.
But I'm watching it and I'm not really I'm getting some out of it. I'm getting some things out of it, but I'm not getting what I want out of it. Right.
So you don't want to do it.
Right.
Okay. I mean, because that's key. Because there's nothing wrong with watching basketball. I'm a big baseball fan. I'll sit there and watch a baseball game. I enjoy it. It's why not? I'm an old guy. I can watch baseball. But the in terms of like, if you don't want to do it, right? There's a number of things here. But in this particular case, the reason I asked you where you're doing it is because one thing you can use to either build or help unravel a habit is to change the context. In other words, in this case, specifically the environment, right? Don't bring your phone to bed. Okay, you can build a habit around leaving your phone in another room. And I've actually worked with clients on this, where say, okay, when I go to, what do you do before you go to? Well, I brush my teeth. When I brush my teeth, brushing teeth comes up a lot. When I brush my teeth, it's a good habit. Right? When I brush my teeth, I put my phone. I don't know the arrangement of your house. I put my phone over here, and then I go to bed. Right. And you celebrate that. Yes. And that becomes the habit. You don't even have. Where's the temptation?
Right.
I've had clients who they wake up in the middle of the night and they're checking their phone, or the first thing in the morning they're scrolling and they're lying in bed for half an hour, and then they don't go work out because now they don't have time. Right. These kinds of things. Okay. Don't put your phone near your bed.
That's it.
Right now, you got to get up and get out. But if you're going to get your phone, you got to get out of bed and walk.
And you don't want to do that.
And guess what? By then, you go, what am I doing?
Right. You could ask yourself, what I love that. What I will say is that is where I find my entertainment for myself throughout my day. And what I have done. So part of this was. What should I do if that's what I want to eliminate? But what I have done, and my motivator right now is I have a conference coming up, and so I'm preparing for it. And one of the things I'm doing to prepare for it is I'm reading a book on original thinking. It's called Originals by Adam Grant.
Sure. Yeah.
And so what I've done is, it's actually on my phone, but what I've done is I set a timer of I got to read for 20 minutes every night. And if I want to watch my entertainment, that's fine. If I want to go through my YouTube videos, that's fine. But I also have a time limit for when I want to go to sleep by.
Yeah.
And I need to meet that time limit. And I also need to meet my 20 minutes of reading. And so it just means that I have to make a decision. And so I've forced
earlier.
Well, I've forced myself to where by 8:40 or whatever it is, I got to be off and I got to be reading, or I got to do it first. Vice versa.
Okay.
So I've done that. That's one of the ways that I've done it, is where I've given myself these restrictions.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is don't do it in bed.
Yeah.
That's another possibility. I mean, this is the thing. You can alter your context.
Yep.
And that is, just change the environment. You don't want to eat junk food? Don't put junk food in your house.
Yeah.
You want to eat more veggies? buy more veggies, stock up, or if you have to have junk food in the house because the kids want it and you don't want to, disappoint them. Okay, make it really hard to get to. Put it in the back of the cabinet. So you have to move like 5 things.
My wife has me hide the junk food.
Yeah. Right.
Because I'm fine. Like I fast.
Oh, you hide it from the kids.
I hide it from everybody.
Okay.
Because I fast.
Okay.
So it doesn't bother me. I could walk by a plate of pizza right now. I'm not eating till 2:00.
Okay.
So, and I love pizza. Actually, I had a Toastmasters meeting at this really cool pizzeria the other day, and Toastmasters is at noon.
Mm-hmm.
On Wednesdays, we meet at noon. And we had it at this really cool pizzeria, brick oven pizza. I mean, the pizza came out, it was gorgeous. It was just like, that nice little burnt crust, beautiful. If you like pizza, you know what I'm talking about right now. And
my cholesterol count doesn't, but
and we had the Toastmasters meeting there, but I fast. So I could smell the pizza, I could see the pizza and all that stuff, but I'm like, I don't eat till 2, so I'm not having any pizza.
Okay.
I said, but I'll come back here with my wife.
But most people don't see, you're motivated. Right,
that's where I was trying to go with the reading at night is I'm motivated. So my habit about watching it, I really, I wanted to give it to you as an example so we can get the phone out of the room. But I don't have a motivation to really stop doing that because I actually enjoy it. Okay. I want to do it.
Well, that's a whole
right. I wanted to bring up that example, but the motivation.
In Tiny Habits, we help people do what they want to do.
Right. It's about the motivation, and I thought, and that's exactly, you got to exactly what I wanted, which was change the context.
Yeah.
Which I think is very important. And right now you're talking about changing the motivation.
Yeah. What I suggest you do if you want to learn more about Tiny Habits, the book is great. It's not an easy read. It's complex stuff. This is really heavy duty stuff, especially chapter 8. But the best thing to do is go to tinyhabits.com, and you'll see at the top it says 5-day program. I used to coach in this program. It's a free program, and in 5 days you will develop 3 new habits. Tiny habits, but 3 new habits. And you work with a coach. It's all done by email and automation. And people are like, I don't have time to do that. I always said to people, if you spent over the entire week 45 minutes total, I don't know what you were doing.
Right.
It's really easy. Like this will not take up any more of your time. And there's people who do it over and over. When I used to coach it, there was this woman in Japan who said, take me over and over, which was great. She was wonderful. I love working with her. But it was all done through email. I always used to offer a Zoom session to if people want that, and every now and then somebody pick me up on that. But and you can do it as many times as you want. It's free. They don't steal your information and spam you or any of that kind of stuff. Because the idea is that we want people to understand that here's the key: you can develop your skills of change.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea. That's what we're about. We're trying to develop people's skills of change. I learned I could change late in life. I didn't think I could. I just wrote a blog piece last week about this. I thought that you were set, right? Because this is what I was taught. This is the way the world was, right? This idea that you can actually improve yourself, especially late in life. I'm 59 years old, and I can change stuff, right? I get up in the morning. I don't moan and groan anymore.
Right.
What? My father did,
Right.
But, so you can actually.
That's part of a union card, though.
It was. he had some really some pains, but he did labor. But he was a newspaper pressman, and so you can change. You must change. Change is going to happen,
right?
And it's whether you have some sort of say in the matter,
right,
or not,
right?
And if change is forced upon you, can you surf it?
Yes,
right, like a wave.
Yeah.
And if there's something you want to do, how do you choose to change?
Yeah, I think those are great. And, 2 things for you in terms of what you just said. So 1, the toothbrushing thing. It's interesting that you brought that up so many times. I actually bring it up in my workshop about brushing your teeth, because when I talk about habit setting, because what people don't realize about brushing your teeth, well, we're talking about everybody that's hygienically sound here, right? Like everybody brushes their teeth every day. Raise your hand. Yeah, everybody's brushing their teeth every day. But go to a 3-year-old. What do you have to tell 3-year-olds?
Yeah.
Go brush your teeth.
Yeah.
What do you have to tell 4-year-olds? Yeah. Go brush your teeth. So it's not like you're just born with a toothbrush in your hand and you're brushing your teeth. You have to be taught that habit. And eventually it was a tiny habit that you learned. You learned how to crawl, you learned how to walk, and you learned how to brush your teeth.
Good point.
And it became a habit. It became a habit because it was reinforced by your parents. It was reinforced by not getting cavities, by all these different things, right? But eventually it became a habit. So I always try to remind people of that when we talk about, because I kind of teach tiny habits, I guess, in a way, but I didn't know that. When I talk to them about replacing the negative habits with the productive habits, I talk about brushing your teeth. Is that once was just a small little habit that you did, that you had to be reminded of, and that you do today. And the other one I want to talk about quickly with what you just said about age. When we talked about Queens College, and I said my parents are graduates.
Yeah.
I had mentioned to you earlier on. So my father's 75 years old as we record this podcast today. And he's 75 years old, and he just re-enrolled in Queens College. He's retired now, and he re-enrolled for 2 courses. And I got to tell you, I spoke to them on my ride in here. I always call my parents every once in a while before I come in. And I was on the phone with my mother, and she's talking, and I just hear him in the background jumping around, just talking, just yapping away. That's what he does.
I love it.
And she goes, yeah, Leonard over here, my father, Leonard over here, I can't have a normal conversation. I said, well, that's what you get for dating a college boy.
No, that's great. I mean, that's a wonderful example too of, I'm thinking a lot about aging lately, a lot about aging. My wife just retired officially. She's a law professor. The end of this semester, she is done. She's starting her own business. She has a business where she helps people she coaches people who are looking to retire and helps them. She's a yoga instructor, so she trains them in yoga, but she also gives them other services
kind
as
of
well.
Transition, yeah.
And financial and whatnot. She hooks them up with people, but it's a great program. Look it up, Marie Ann said it. And so
we'll have her on.
Yeah, okay, that would be great. Well, then you'll be like, why did I ever have that other guy on?
No
She's
way.
amazing. Everybody loves Marie. It's funny, people like me, and then they meet Marie, and it's like Jim's off to the side. But so I've been thinking a lot about aging, and I just watched my father go through hell. My mom died in 2020, 85. My mom did yoga right up to the bitter end, pretty much. She was in better shape. Like, you wouldn't believe this woman was 85. Wow. And then she got nasty form of cancer, was dead pretty quickly. And then my father, and nobody expected, least of all my father, for my father to outlive my mother. No one. And my father was in chronic pain for decades, just from doing hard
labor.
When you're pressing, you're lifting. It's skilled labor, but you're lifting heavy things of paper and all this. His knees were destroyed on your feet the whole time, and so he suffered a lot. And he didn't do himself any favors either, but he just thought like suffering was it. This is what you do. You just suffer, and then eventually you suffer more, and then you suffer more, and then you die. And that's what happened. He died last March. So when I was very close to him, particularly at the end. I talked to him every day on the phone, and just watching what he was going through and realizing how he had made choices in his life about the way the world is, the way things work. He's a wonderful guy, great leader. Both my parents were brilliant. They had high school educations, but they were brilliant. But he had these ideas about the world that were his enemy in the end. But it was too late for him to want to change. It was just beyond his capability. And I thought, not me. I'm going to do it differently. And fortunately, around the same time, I found Tiny Habits and became a coach, and that helped a lot, because also I'm like, oh my God, I'm changing these things. I always thought I'd just bite my fingernails right. I thought I'd be in the coffin, 100 years old, and have these gnarly little fingernails. Yeah. And I hate to keep using that example, but that's the one I'm using.
That's one. Yeah. I mean, it happened. It's with so many things. I talk a lot about how I don't drink alcohol anymore. And it started because of a tiny habit that I think I had mentioned to you earlier, because I was going to so many networking events. Every night of the week. Right. And I started cutting alcohol out because I said, I'd be drinking every night of the week. Right. Cut it out there. That, this is several years of a process that I didn't even, I unconsciously, I always tell people I accidentally quit drinking alcohol.
That's funny.
Because I unconsciously was just removing it from my daily life, eventually my weekend life. Eventually it was like, over the weekend, why am I having this beer? Why am I having this? There was other motivators, like some of it was to lose weight, some of it was to be in better shape, and it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm probably going to have a beer, or I'm going to have an event. But eventually, by not having the beer that weekend and thinking, oh, at that party I'll have a drink, and then at that party not having the drink, and then another week goes by, and another, and eventually by eliminating it slowly and through this long process, and quite accidentally, I must tell you, that it eventually became conscious, where it was like consciously I said, well, I haven't drank this long and I don't really want to drink.
Keep going, yeah.
Why would I want the drink now? Why do I want it? And of course, when we find out in science about how terrible alcohol is and how it causes atrophy of the brain and all these different things, and we're not even talking about high levels, but that's besides the point. The point that I'm making here of what the tiny habits is that I think it's also allowing time for these habits to grow and manifest into maybe what your ultimate desire is. I don't think that when I first stopped drinking alcohol, my ultimate desire was to never drink alcohol, but I can certainly say that it wasn't a bad outcome. And it was years ago, I'm talking 2018, when I made that commitment of I'm not drinking at networking events anymore. And I certainly got drunk after that, but it wasn't at a networking event.
Right.
But it took years, and eventually from not having that one more beer, one more drink, one more that, eventually it turned into I just don't drink anymore. And it just is what it is. And I just choose not to. But it's a tiny habit, to your point, that started years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really a habit, right? Because your habit was drinking, and you unraveled that slowly.
Unraveled the habit. Okay, fair enough.
Which is a little bit different.
That's fair.
Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's almost the opposite in a way. Yeah, but I do feel really obligated to point out that if it weren't for alcohol, I never would have met my wife. But I hadn't come home drunk and fall off the couch.
Listen, you know what? I'm another one that you and I definitely are in cahoots on, because my wife and I, same thing. We were the barflies that were at the party, and we were the last ones out, and we were definitely drinking. I mean, she's Irish and very proud of her Irish nature of being able to hold her own. And but both of us, we just don't drink anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But yeah, keep going. Yeah.
No, but anyhow, I was just making a joke about me falling off the couch and joining stage crew. But I mean, this is the tiny habit stuff is really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to talk about in the abstract sometimes. You really just want to get down to it. It's very practical. There's actually Master Networks. We're having another one of those summits, and like the one we did in the fall. And I'm doing a Tiny Habits workshop. It's on March 6th. You're welcome to come.
Cool.
I'll send you the information. And it's we're doing this one in Nyack at the Nyack Seaport, 1:30.
Very
so
cool.
People out there, it's on Eventbrite. Look for the tickets.
Yep.
And so I'm really excited because I've never actually been able to present a Tiny Habits workshop before. I've had one ginned up for a while, and every time I'm supposed to do one, something happens.
Well, I think that's going to be really cool, and I think if you could add the unraveling, because I didn't realize
we'll be able to work that in there.
Well, because what you just said to me, right? I thought it was a habit that I created, not drinking.
Yeah.
But you're saying it's unraveling, and that's huge, right? Because I didn't realize that I was unraveling a habit. I thought it was I created a habit of not drinking, but it's unraveling.
Yeah, I don't think you can create a habit of not.
Right. That makes perfect sense when you say it now, right? I would love to hear that. But yeah, your presentation last time was awesome. I'd be happy to come to it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'll send you the information.
Yeah, unfortunately for you listening out there, this podcast, this March 6th event has come and gone. But of course, we're going to have Jim on my LinkedIn Live show.
That's some dumb luck there.
Yeah, but you know what? We'll have it on my LinkedIn Live show.
Okay.
And you'll get to tell everybody about it there. So all of you listening right now, look up tinyhabits.com, look up Jim, right? Because you're a tiny habit coach.
I am a Tiny Habits coach. It's part of what I do. I'm a leadership coach. I'm a leadership speaker and writer.
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways to meet you. So could you just share some of your contact information with everybody?
Yeah. My website is all one word, guidanceforgreatness.com. I have my newsletter and podcast is, you can find it, pretty much anywhere, but it's called On Leading with Greatness, and it's on Substack at jimsalvucci.substack.com. But if you look up On Leading with Greatness on Apple or whatever, you can find it.
You'll find it, yeah.
And you look me up on LinkedIn. I can't remember what my handle is. I always forget. But I do a lot on LinkedIn now.
You could change that. You could change it to your name.
Yeah,
or you could change it to
I forget how I have it configured.
You forget how it's configured. Yeah, but Jim Salvucci.
Yeah, I think it's Jim Salvucci, PhD.
You'll find him. He's the first connect with me now.
Yeah, that's right.
You'll find him, and you'll be on my LinkedIn Live show, so you will have been up on when you all hear this. And then for all of you listening, this is also not just being recorded in the iHeart studio, but we're also recording live on YouTube.
Very
So the
excited.
video is up on YouTube
I've never
already.
been live on YouTube.
That's it.
before, right?
Hello, YouTube, everybody.
Hello,
There's the camera. Hello, everybody.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
We're like the people at the Jumbotron, waving the Jumbotron.
We're
The
waving.
camera's over here.
Let's get the kiss cam on. But no, this has really been a pleasure having you in
Yeah.
studio and getting to chat with you and getting to know you on a deeper level. Sharing our
Absolutely.
stories
No,
of
it's
high
been great.
school
Really
and
enjoy it, yeah.
tiny
Like
habits and
debauchery
unraveling. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
my shameful stories. By the way, I just remembered one more thing about my website. If you go on that and you sign up on the website, I just had it put up today is my new giveaway.
Okay.
So I have something called the Transform to Greatness Toolkit. Very simple. It looks like it's long, but it's actually it's just laid out in a big way. But it's just 5 things about how to become a better leader. Just 5 points. And each one, I give a tiny habit recipe.
Awesome. Well, reach out to Jim if you want to become a better. And I know your old state saying is you want to rid the world of bad bossing.
That was the way I used to say.
And how do you say it today?
Today, I say I want to guide today's young bosses to become the next generation of great leaders.
That's awesome.
Join the movement.
Join the movement, everyone. It's been a pleasure having you on today. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
It's been cool.
Michael's been great.
Awesome, man. Well, that's a wrap. 2 hours and 30 minutes later.
Oh my God.
Could you believe
I
it?
thought we'd get like 15 minutes in. Wow.
That's awesome.
Can't believe that.
And let's see if this is still going. Stop cam, I guess. Now let's go exit full screen first. End stream. There we go.
Was anybody watching?